The stout boy lashed the blade wildly. He was done being the family joke. But then his clumsiness caught up. He tripped over his own weight, and the blade sank deep into his gut. That is how stomach surgery was first invented. He didn't die. Well, mostly. Now that lazy noble is about to become a terrifyingly powerful prince. He will thrash his brother, and even win the heart of a lethal 1,000-year-old elven warrior. She is more than just beautiful. She is likely the deadliest soul in the kingdom. But after that accident, the prince changed completely. Want the real secret? The hero of this story isn't the boy, but the very blade that ran him through. It passed through many hands for centuries. This was the steel that carved out the legends of this world. Back then, the sword had a companion, a humble village lad with the surname Leonberger. Together, they achieved the impossible. They slayed a colossal dragon from the peak of the frozen mountains. After that victory, Leonberger rose to become the king. Meanwhile, the legendary blade Gruhan was locked away in the shadows, tasked with protecting his friend's royal bloodline for eternity. That is when the ancient weapon finally opened its eyes. Some fool was swinging him around. This spoiled noble claimed he was the sword's new master and began lashing out like a child with no dignity. But when Gruhan activated his powers, he realized this mess was actually a descendant of his old friend, despite being a walking pig in silk robes. The boy just wanted the court's approval, and maybe the chance to eat 8 massive lunches in a single day. He hoped to ride on Gruhan's power, but after a few clumsy swings, he tripped over his own stomach and hit the floor. He never imagined his own weapon would be the one to give him such a brutal, unplanned stomach surgery. Bloodline or not, this guy might be the densest noble in history. He even laid there on the floor, shouting at the top of his lungs, blaming the sword. The kingdom hated the thought of him ruling. He was greedy, arrogant, and slow. This was the pathetic Prince Adrian Leonberger. But everything shifted the moment he accidentally impaled himself with that legendary blade. Word soon spread that he'd finally stopped smashing dining tables and running with common thieves. But inside his chambers, the truth was much more complicated than anyone guessed. Gruhan was stunned to find he'd killed the boy and possessed his body, whether the old sword liked it or not. Now he was a disgraced prince. Oh, and he was also a pig. That is a hard truth. A maid interrupted to say his master had arrived. Adrian was fuming, since the man had never bothered to visit him before. As for the master, he assumed the prince was still the same arrogant brat, even after his brush with death. He was only there to fulfill his duties as a mentor. But the prince did not even recognize him. He used the accident as a convenient excuse to claim he had amnesia. Suddenly, the guards announced that His Majesty the King had arrived. The boy's father marched in. Adrian was actually impressed. The king looked far more powerful and commanding than the rumors had suggested. The king assumed nothing had changed, since the boy didn't even offer a proper royal greeting. Still, the court was whispering about Adrian's memory loss. Soon, the royal physician arrived to take a closer look. There is nothing physically wrong with him besides the 300 pounds of fat. Maybe it is just shock from the accident. The king called it too convenient. Forgetting the past doesn't just erase all the trouble he's caused for the crown. So, naturally, he will be confined to the castle walls for the foreseeable future. He needs to be locked up without food to see if he can actually lose some weight. Adrian wondered what happened. Just then, his mother rushed in to hug him. She promised his memories would return once the confusion cleared up. You can see the difference between the parents immediately. His father is cold, but his mother is just overjoyed to see him wake up after such a scare. She begged him not to touch dangerous weapons again. She didn't know how she would have survived if he had died. Poor woman, she has no clue that her actual son is already gone for good. Nothing to be done now. A moment later, she told him to get some rest and promised to check on him again later in the evening. Adrian was left alone, trying to process this mess. His old friend had begged him to protect his family. Instead, he ended up killing one of them by mistake. Even if it was an accident, it still happened. Since there's no going back, he decided to live well in this body for his friend's sake. He spent his last life as a tool cleaning up after others. Now he was stuck in a weak, soft body with zero talent. But that is fine. He will just rely on brute force and the training he used on those children. Step 1. Refine the mana heart. Out of nowhere, he drew a sharp breath, feeling the pulse of energy within. Suddenly, the spell unravels, and the young lord feels the mana begin to flow through him. But his weak frame cannot withstand the strain. He attempts the ritual several times, but each effort fails miserably. This vessel is pathetic. Had he his old warrior form, he could simply force the essence into his veins. A maid enters the chambers, carrying a rare elixir sent by the queen herself for his recovery. The servant looks annoyed, clearly hoping he won't shatter the glass again. To his shock, the boy senses a dense trace of mana swirling within the tonic. Without a second thought, the lad gulps down every single drop. The maid stands frozen as he drains the goblet. Arthur focuses his will, calling upon his mana heart once more, relieved that this fuel might actually work. The power is faint and will surely fade within a single day. Yet he won't let it escape. He calmly asks the maid if there is any more of that special potion. Days pass by, and the young heir is thrilled. The time has finally come to forge his very own mana heart. He has mastered this process in past lives, but suddenly, a sharp, agonizing pain erupts through his soft body. A memory strikes him. Forming a core was never easy. It always demanded a price in absolute, crushing agony. He cannot succumb to the darkness. If he loses consciousness now, the mana will backflow and tear him apart. Arthur clenches his teeth and focuses. He forces the energy into place, slowly crafting the core. After a brutal hour, the feat is finished. Now it is done. This isn't a weapon forged for a master, but a mana heart that belongs solely to him. Suddenly, a shimmering arcane screen floats before his eyes, confirming that his mana heart has been successfully manifested. Arthur realizes these messages resemble the reports he gave his masters as a sentient blade. Why is this power manifesting in this life? A flood of mystical notifications begins to fill his vision, declaring that his connection to the primordial origin is restoring. He gains several boons, though his most powerful skills remain strictly locked. He scans the room, noticing that his eyesight has become incredibly sharp. His hearing has sharpened as well. He can clearly track footsteps echoing from beyond the heavy door. Suddenly, a wave of fatigue hits him. The screen warns that his current mana reserves are completely spent. Arthur sighs. He understands his limits now. That legendary sword sense, which allowed him to perceive every angle without blind spots, is currently gone. For the moment, even a tiny spark of mana lets him eavesdrop on the hallway or see through the gloom. If he expands his capacity, his powers will surely evolve. But how can he possibly achieve that in this soft body? Hunger gnaws at his stomach. The pampered boy cannot endure this. First, he must learn how to live as a human. Later that afternoon, the queen beams with joy, seeing her son has finished every drop of his medicinal tonic. He is finally starting to respect his own body. Just then, an imposing figure enters the royal chambers. The queen asks if he recognizes the man. The visitor scoffs, noting that the boy truly has lost his mind. The queen insists her brother should train the child. After all, he is the man's only nephew and heir. Watching the exchange, Arthur can tell at a glance that this stern uncle has no love for him whatsoever. The uncle speaks plainly. The only thing he is willing to do is help the boy shed some of his gluttonous weight. He offers nothing more, warning him not to expect miracles. The queen quickly agrees that this is a fair start. Before long, our hero is enduring hellish drills. His uncle declares that every meal, every drink, and every breath now requires his express permission. If he expects the soft life of a noble prince, he should abandon those delusions immediately. His only path is grueling labor. If he shows true grit, the uncle might eventually reveal the family's secret ancestral sword techniques. Arthur is fuming. He wants to lecture this man. After all, he once coached the invincible knight and the first king himself. Fine then. If that is the case, let us make a wager. Within 6 months, he will earn the man's respect. First, he must shatter that arrogant smirk once and for all. If he fails, he will obey any command. But if he wins, the uncle must grant him one single wish. The seasoned warrior is amused by the boy's gall. He accepts, needing some entertainment to liven up his dull days. Very well. Arthur knows he spoke boldly, but this heavy, untrained body is going to be a massive obstacle. He has no choice but to use mana. His first priority is burning away the excess weight from his frame. The veteran watches the boy closely and suddenly delivers a sharp smack to his shoulder. He demands to know if the boy has formed a core. Arthur smirks, admitting he finished it recently. Does his uncle regret the bet? But the old man just stares, asking what on earth possessed him to pull a stunt like that. He wants to know where he learned to refine a soul core. Clearly, our hero hasn't realized his mistake yet. After all, the soul core is a primitive technique, used only by bottom-tier sellswords and low-life mercenaries. Of course, the kid is completely lost. He thinks the world is ending and demands to know what the elder means. The old man figures it's easier to show than tell, so he warns the boy to keep his eyes peeled. The boy stares in shock at the energy swirling into a perfect ring. Suddenly, it surges, shattering his own internal power. Then the elder explains that these modern currents are designed specifically to crush the outdated energy of a soul core. Not only is it deadlier, it's also way more stable than that ancient soul core method he's currently using. Even the noble house of Alera, who clung to the soul core, went extinct a century ago. Now nobody uses it. Time slips by, and as the boy pores over old records, he realizes just how much the world has changed. Mages rely on circles, while knights weave currents to gather power. A warrior's rank is decided by the threads they weave. It doesn't sound completely ridiculous when you think about it. As he keeps reading the book, he stumbles upon a familiar name in the text, Alaric Ringan. The boy freezes. He remembers a man from long ago who wielded a strange power, neither knight nor mage, who once sought him out. The name rings a bell, making him wonder where that man is now. Shortly after, we find our hero back at training. His uncle asks if he finished that book, assuming the boy finally understands the situation and just how foolish he's been. But the kid is brimming with confidence, firing back that he doesn't believe he made any mistake at all. Not every soul core is the same. He asks his uncle if he's ever heard of the difference in tiers. His uncle just scoffs, mentioning that there are plenty of delusional mercenaries out there exactly like him. They're just fools pretending to be legendary heroes from centuries ago. He asks the boy if he knows what became of them. They couldn't even stand against a two-current knight and were utterly crushed in battle. If the boy thinks he's special, he'll have to prove it by defeating a double-current knight to earn his uncle's guardianship. Hearing the challenge, our hero just smirks, asking if having his uncle as a guardian is even worth the effort. Dead silence follows. The uncle grows visibly irritated, declaring that he is a high count and commander of the northern host, one of the king's 5 silver lions. This guy has a seriously long list of titles. He is also a 4-current knight with many other honors, but let's just call him Lord 𝑑𝒓𝒊𝒏𝒄𝒆'𝒔 for now. Who could possibly outrank a man like him? He asks if those credentials are finally enough for the boy. Suddenly, every soldier present raises their blade in salute, urging 𝑑𝒓𝒊𝒏𝒄𝒆'𝒔 to step back. This man is an absolute beast. The two of them just stand there, locked in a tense stare-down. Soon after, the boy is completely spent. His uncle calls it a day, leaving our hero to limp through the halls, almost killed. He pushes open a heavy door, only to find someone waiting there specifically for him. Adrian recognizes him as the royal physician. The doctor bows, claiming he's touched that His Highness would remember someone so humble. Either way, he is curious to know exactly what brought the doctor to his quarters. The physician explains that the queen herself ordered him to provide some urgent healing magic for the boy. He starts the spell, but Adrian immediately tosses him out, snapping that magic would just throw all his training progress in the bin. Nearby, a knight watches everything Adrian does, looking genuinely shocked by the prince's actions. Just then, a kid swings the door open, asking if his brother is around. He stares while eating, wondering who this idiot is. The knight, leaning over his shoulder, whispers the truth into his ear, that this is actually the third prince. The arrogant kid speaks up, claiming he heard that his brother had met with a very unfortunate accident. But sadly, he looks much healthier than expected. Adrian fires back, asking if the prince has nothing better to do than provoke him. Man, this kid is seriously itching for a fight. The prince snaps, calling him a fool for stabbing himself, before mentioning that some very interesting news has been going around. Word is, he made a reckless wager with Count 𝒂𝒂𝒅 and plans to duel a knight who can weave two currents. If that's true, he wants to know if he can take that spot as the opponent. Whoa, things are definitely heating up. A while later, Adrian is left wondering what just happened, questioning if all the descendants of House Leonberg are this insane. Word spread that night that Prince Julian had been a fencing prodigy since he could first hold a blade. Mastering 2 mana rings by age 14 was an unheard of feat. Just then, a servant arrived clutching a stack of urgent correspondence for the young heir. The boy was utterly clueless about what was happening. Sifting through the mail, he realized every single letter was a formal challenge to a duel. It was a legal way for his rivals to thrash him. Naturally, our hero refused to retreat. He summoned the maid and ordered her to record the name of every single noble who dared challenge him. Soon after, the boy was out on the grounds when his uncle, Lord Valerius, commanded him to take up a practice blade. He needed to master the fundamentals for their wager to be valid. The knight didn't want any pathetic excuses about losing due to lack of training. Agreeing to the terms, Adrian retrieved the sword from the dirt, but he instantly felt a sharp, stinging sensation through his limbs. That, my friends, is what we call pure muscle fatigue. His uncle looked shocked, wondering why the boy had not requested restorative magic. But Adrian countered that a true knight knows healing spells only reset the muscles to their previous state, rather than allowing them to grow stronger. Lord Valerius accepted this with a silent nod, drawing his own steel and warning the boy he would only demonstrate the forms once. This was the standard drilling style taught to every squire in the kingdom to build their martial foundation. He then began to execute the forms with terrifying precision and lethal grace. The man was truly a master. Adrian could only watch in stunned silence as the cold steel blurred before him. He marveled that such a sophisticated display was considered merely the basic training for the royal guard. Valerius explained that because the style remained true to the basics, there was no better starting point for a novice. Given the boy's raw potential, it would be more than sufficient. Upon hearing this, Adrian couldn't help but let out a chuckle. He thought about how, no matter how many centuries had slipped away, the legendary style that once slew the great worm was now treated as a mere drill. His uncle added that this alone wouldn't win their wager. Once he mastered the basics, he would need to ask the Duchess to hire a true fencing master. But the boy shook his head. There was no need for another teacher. This style alone would be enough to conquer any foe. Surprised by his confidence, the knight told him to do as he pleased. Without a moment's delay, Adrian threw himself into training. It was ironic that the modern dragon-slaying art was now regarded as nothing more than a trivial exercise for children. Truthfully, he hated to admit the reality of it. But this secret art required the literal will to cleave through scales. Modern men had simply lost the heart required for such a feat. Since people forgot how to imbue their steel with spirit, they could no longer recognize the true power hidden within the wormsbane techniques. Suddenly, Valerius drew his sword to block the boy's incoming strike with effortless ease. He explained that merely tensing your arm didn't translate to power in the blade. At least the old knight was teaching him the right way. He tapped different points across the boy's stiff posture. He explained that strength must flow through the entire body in unison to truly master the weight of the steel. Listening closely, the boy climbed back to his feet. even if this flabby body could only mimic a fraction of the true dragon-slaying art. He would personally prove that this technique was not some relic to be discarded. And so, my friends, the days turned into grueling weeks. A full month passed. Then, the ethereal system notified him that his rigorous training had finally begun to alter his physical constitution. His morbid weight shifted toward a stockier build. His metabolism roared to life, and his body grew accustomed to the relentless repetition of the sword drills. Gradually, the kid was starting to get built like a total tank. He realized he was handling the blade with far more natural grace than he had only 1 month prior. He was clearly growing more powerful with every single passing day. Suddenly, his furious uncle barked a command to stop right there. The boy's sword clattered onto the stone tiles, and a heavy, tense silence filled the air. Adrian's palms were already slick with blood from pushing his limits. As his uncle approached, Adrian glanced at the training dummy. It had been reduced to nothing but splinters and scrap. It looked like a thunderbolt had struck the target. Valerius warned him that if he had used a real steel blade, he would have been killed. The boy absorbed the lecture in silence. Looking down, he saw his palms were now covered in thick, rough calluses. Right then, a notification flickered before his eyes, announcing he had attained a state of absolute, extreme concentration. He collapsed onto the ground, unconscious. Valerius stood over his nephew, watching the exhausted boy with a strange look. He muttered that the boy was a fool, but slowly, the kid was earning his respect. Later, Adrian woke up, groggily realizing he had passed out. Still, long before he knew the physical limits of a mortal body, he was a legend, a weapon of myth wielded by the greatest kings. He turned the tide of crusades, sharpened the spirits of men, and mentored entire dynasties. Known then as Alistair, he was more than steel. He was a master and a sage. Yet, no matter how many wars he won, he remained a mere witness to history. Now, he swings his blade with a feverish desperation, hungry to finally feel the burn of his own sweat and toil. He wants his own legacy, but this frail mortal vessel has limits. If he pushes too hard, his bones will snap. Balance is the only way forward, right? A full month has passed since he forged his mana core, and he has steadily gathered energy within his chest during that time. Finally, it is time to ascend to the next level. Concentrating deeply, the boy feels his power swell. After weeks of grueling drills, his capacity for magic has grown, allowing his physical frame to endure much greater strain. His mana core expands, pulse by pulse. When he finally opens his eyes, the transformation is undeniable. The fruits of his labor are finally beginning to ripen. Wasting not a single second, the young lord reaches for his steel, sensing a shift. He has officially crossed the threshold to become a recognized sword apprentice. He has mastered the fundamentals, finding himself capable of manifesting a faint aura, the mark of a true warrior in this realm. Later, as Adrian hones his skills, his uncle arrives with grim news. Rumors of the boy's progress are already echoing through the halls of the capital. That reckless wager started it all. Now, his uncle suggests he find a real opponent to face in a duel. Adrian already has a target in mind. However, taking on a knight with a dual mana current right away would be a suicidal move for his current body. It makes more sense to test his mettle against single current fighters first. Better to be cautious, right? Adrian beckons, a loyal knight who confirms that all the necessary preparations have been made as per the young lord's orders. A thick stack of duel challenges sits before him. The knight wonders if the prince truly intends to go through with these practice matches. Many of these challengers hold deep-seated grudges and will likely use this opportunity to draw blood. But Adrian is no fool. He has already secured his uncle to act as the impartial referee. The request is simple enough. He just needs his uncle to step in before anyone actually ends up in a casket. A small favor for a high-stakes game. A single day flickers by, and the morning of the first challenge finally dawns upon the castle. The first challenger stands waiting at the iron gates, his mind filled with bitter thoughts of the arrogant young prince he must face. His name is Sir Thomas, the second-born son of a minor house of the gentry. Years ago, his father and brother were humiliated by the prince in a way that no man of honor could ever forget. Their reputation was dragged through the mud, leaving his kin as the laughingstocks of the high court to this very day. Because of that shame, he is determined to make Adrian pay a heavy price for his past transgressions. He offers a cold greeting, announcing himself as Thomas, a knight who wields a single mana current. Adrian scoffs at the ceremony, reminding him this is just a practice bout. Then he twists the knife, questioning if Thomas is truly a knight at all, given how fragile he looks. Fury boils in Thomas's veins. The rumors were right. The prince is as insufferable and haughty as they say. Suddenly, Lord Valerius intervenes, claiming he fully understands the knight's righteous anger. But he commands Thomas to lower his weapon until the match officially begins. Thomas, clearly starstruck by the legendary commander, bows low and expresses what an honor it is to meet him. Adrian dryly notes that his uncle is the one getting the royal treatment. Valerius simply retorts that perhaps Adrian should have spent more time earning respect than burning bridges. Enough talk. The duel is set, and the two warriors lock eyes across the dusty field. Thomas ignites his aura and lunges forward with a roar. Adrian flares his mana cord just in time, catching the heavy blow on his steel. Thomas recoils in shock, recognizing the ancient style Adrian is wielding as he scrambles to put distance between them. Wide-eyed, he stammers that a mere mana core shouldn't be able to stop a knight's current. Is it simply because his own power is too weak? Suddenly, a strange hum fills the air. Valerius narrows his eyes, realizing he is hearing the legendary Song of the Sword. Refusing to accept defeat, Thomas charges again with desperate speed. Adrian calmly tracks every twitch of his opponent's muscles, meeting the incoming steel with perfect timing once more. The dance of blades continues until Thomas begins to wheeze, his stamina rapidly fading. Adrian is gasping for air too. He realizes now that the friction between a mana core and a mana current is no myth. It feels as if his own energy is trying to crawl back down his throat. Shaking off the pain, he asks if Thomas is indeed the son of Baron Talheim. Regardless, he must clear his mind. Closing his eyes, the young prince slips into a deep, meditative trance. He whispers for a hidden power to wake up, knowing that the legendary blade is etched into his very soul. Just then, that massive beast stirs. Arthur realizes this is the blade's ancient memory, the heart's essence forged to slay dragons. Essentially, it is the true power of the dragon slayer. I cannot believe he is pulling this off in such a weak body. Simultaneously, that divine power surges forth. Tristan is left there, struggling to process what in the world is even happening. Right then, Lord Valerius commands them to end the duel. But Prince Arthur is not listening and lunges straight for the young knight. Suddenly, we see a flashback of our hero, telling his uncle that he has a single favor to ask of him. If it seems like he might actually kill his opponent, then his uncle must intervene. And that is exactly how it played out. The poor prince was tossed aside like a rag doll. Valerius clearly was not there to play any games. The boy is left broken on the ground. Soldiers immediately restrain Lord Valerius, shouting that his actions could, depending on the situation, be viewed as the attempted murder of royalty. But then Arthur stands up, telling the guards to back off because the intervention was his own personal request. Still, he never actually asked the man to knock him out cold. And just like that, the young prince finally loses consciousness. He wakes up shortly after, realizing his uncle's strength is on a totally different level and cannot be compared to some single core trash. Fortunately, he does not seem to be hurt. In the end, things worked out since he won the duel. Right then, his uncle appears and asks him what he was thinking. On top of that, he demands to know the secret of that impure sword, since he never taught the boy anything like that. Our hero confidently replies that he was simply being true to the core essence of the blade. Valerius falls silent. He then asks if the boy truly believes that murderous intent is the essence of the sword. It is quite unsettling, but regardless, It remains one of the absolute truths. Arthur is genuinely surprised. He thought his uncle would lecture him about how the path of the sword is purely about self-refinement. But the man explains he is a soldier, not a knight. He walks the path of victory, not some noble, righteous path. However, the boy's blade is excessive. If that killing intent grows too strong, he will lose the ability to distinguish friend from foe. Either way, he will simply watch to see whether or not the prince is eventually devoured by his own inner demons. 3 days pass after that chaos. Arthur is still training with Sir Tristan, complimenting the young man for doing such an excellent job throughout these past few days. After all, surviving for 3 days straight against a blade filled with uncontrollable killing intent is a truly impressive feat. Immediately after, the young prince calls for the maid, who arrives carrying a small wooden chest. He mentions hearing about her unforgivable past and admits he is not sure if this gesture will help her feel any better. Regardless, she must deliver this chest to her father. As the training concludes, Arthur tells himself he has no real obligation to clean up the mess that bastard left behind. But if he puts someone to work, it is only fair to pay the price. As time passes, the prince's duels become a hot topic of conversation throughout the entire kingdom. Honestly, it is hard to tell if his reputation is actually improving. Despite waiting for days, the news everyone expected simply never arrived. The knights were starting to change their minds about him, though the royal family was likely keeping them quiet. Our hero did not seem happy about it, claiming they were just embarrassed to have lost and decided to shut their mouths. These lazy nobles really have nothing better to do. They should try doing something actually productive with their spare time. Hearing that, Lord Valerius snaps that he has absolutely no right to say something like that. The boy looks at the knight standing beside him, telling the man to spread the results of the duel once he finally leaves. That should help calm the rumors. But right then, the maid appears, saying there is a rumor that he used the sword's power to fake the result of today's match. Hearing that news only makes Prince Arthur even more irritated. He decides to ignore it and keep training. As he performs a series of strikes, his mana hearts seem to be growing much stronger. He asks how many opponents are left. The knight replies that there is only one more challenger remaining for the day. Arthur notes that apprentice knights are no longer a challenge, but his companion warns that the final opponent is a true master of the blade. This knight was never satisfied with simply polishing his family's ceremonial blade. She is a prodigious talent who joined a holy order to master the sword. Her name is Lady Alara Vance, and every soldier stares as she enters the castle. She carries many titles, from the cliff flower to the thorny rose, and is famous for breaking the hearts of countless noblemen. She is truly a remarkable woman. For someone of her status to arrive uninvited, the prince must possess some truly incredible martial skills. Regardless, it would be quite the spectacle if the prince ended up being defeated by her in the end. What is this? Are you actually rooting against your own side? The Iron Lion Order is legendary, standing as the most elite and skilled company of knights in the entire kingdom. Being an apprentice, there basically guarantees a spot as a full knight. Naturally, Adrian wonders why such a prodigy wants to duel a prince. Word is they had a bit of a nasty disagreement some time ago. The prince immediately realizes his past self probably messed up. Turning to a maid, he asks for the truth about his past sins. She explains he insulted her honor, and the prince curses his past life stupidity. Memories flood back of him grabbing the girl by the shoulder. He had told her that the rumors were right. She truly was fascinating. He asked if she wanted to be his personal servant. She immediately shoved his hand away, declaring the Order of Knights was not his plaything. Of course, the arrogant prince threw a tantrum, calling her hideously ugly right to her face. Back in reality, Adrian stays quiet, absorbing the weight of his previous idiocy. He thinks no sane man could call her ugly. Arwen approaches the prince, noting that despite the passage of time, he hasn't changed one bit. She looks far from pleased, and Adrian knows he only has himself to blame. Valahard steps in, eyeing the newcomer. She greets the veteran commander, introducing herself as a mere apprentice of the Iron Lion Order. He warns them to watch out for the prince's blade, claiming it carries a toxic edge. Seriously, even his own men are rooting against him. With the terms set, the duel is finally ready to kick off. Arwen draws her steel instantly. Adrian prepares himself, eager to witness the legendary prowess of the Iron Lion's most famous rising star. Without a second of hesitation, the girl charges straight for his throat. Her speed is breathtaking. He barely manages to parry her strike, feeling his inner mana surge in response to the pressure. Arwen reads his every move, unleashing a relentless flurry of strikes to keep him pinned. Adrian realizes he is being completely outmatched. At this rate, his defense won't hold much longer. She lunges again, and in that split second, Adrian triggers his powerful dragon-slaying technique. Arwen senses the shift instantly. Adrian deflects her blade with ease, forcing her to retreat and question the nature of his sword. Adrian notes that not all knights are created equal. Without a doubt, she stands on a level far above the mediocre warriors he's faced. He uses his system to scan her, wondering if his limited power can measure her. If he can read her, she might be his equal. Regardless, the gloves are off now. Both warriors charge forward, meeting in a clash of cold steel. Hours slip by, until everyone on the field is completely spent. Vallahard draws his own blade, calling an end to the day's match. The duel will resume tomorrow morning. Adrian claims he was just seconds away from winning. Arwen scoffs, saying what a coincidence, she was about to finish him too. As they continue to bicker, Vallahard commands them to stop this nonsense. It's late, and their bloody wounds need immediate attention from the healers. Healers arrive and begin casting their magic. Adrian can't take his eyes off the girl, and surprisingly, she's staring right back at him. They eventually go their separate ways, but Adrian is determined. He will not lose this fight. A good while passes, and the local soldiers start joking that this duel is never actually going to end. It's now the third day of combat. Honestly, the men are stunned, knowing just how skilled Arwen is supposed to be. But His Highness is showing incredible talent too. Either way, everyone's hoping a winner is finally crowned today. Just before the blades clash, Adrian holds up a hand, saying he has a proposal. Arwen asks if he's finally going to apologize for his past insults. If that's the case, she's definitely not interested in hearing them. The boy shakes his head. Since they're fighting with such intensity, he thinks there should be a proper prize at stake. The loser must grant the winner a single wish. Upon hearing this bold wager, Arwen falls completely silent. The watching soldiers are shocked, claiming such a bet is beneath a member of the royalty. But the prince couldn't care less. He asks for her answer, and she reminds him that even though she is still just an apprentice, she is a sworn member of an order loyal to the noble house of Leonberger. She wouldn't dream of disrespecting the crown, but if the prince himself allows it, she will accept this wager. Adrian draws his blade immediately, warning her not to complain once he wins. Honestly, I can already tell this isn't going to end well. They resume the duel, locked in another perfect stalemate. Adrian seems thrilled by the challenge, once again unleashing that ridiculously overpowered and legendary sword technique. Arwen is stunned. His movements are much faster than they were yesterday, making her suspect he's been hiding his true strength all along. The prince keeps up his relentless assault, forcing Arwen to stay entirely on the defensive. She retreats, exhausted, but Adrian keeps the pressure on her. The brat simply refuses to give her a break. He strikes again, and a blade goes spinning into the sky. It was the knight who fell. Watching this, the soldiers are frozen in pure disbelief. Even Lord Vallahard is stunned. Adrian, grinning with confidence, claims his prize. Raising his sword, he declares he wants her. Things escalated from 0 to 100 in a heartbeat. Escort knight to the infamous scoundrel prince of the realm. Honestly, it was not as difficult as she first imagined. He might seem arrogant, but he is nowhere near as wicked as the rumors suggested. In fact, he was the complete opposite. He watched our hero training out in the rain, warning the boy that those conditions were far too dangerous. At that exact moment, a bolt of lightning strikes right before him. Yet Adrian did not even seem to notice the strike. That was when she knew His Highness was destined for absolute greatness. Back in the present, the soldiers are still reeling from the young man's bizarre request. The knight can hardly believe it, questioning her judgment. Sensing her doubt, Arwen asks if this is truly his desire. He points out she is just an apprentice who lost a duel to a supposed failure of a prince. But that is why he wants her. He wants the potential of the knight named Arwen Kirian. He needs a knight who follows him out of choice, not by a king's command. Someone who belongs only to him, a blade that is truly his own. She clearly has remarkable talent. Once more, he asks the girl to serve as his personal knight. She stays silent, realizing she has finally become the person she always dreamed of being. Yet no one ever treated her like a true warrior, so she worked twice as hard as anyone. Even after crushing every other apprentice and proving her worth, the title of knight remained out of her reach. But now, everything changes. Someone actually wants her for her potential. She wonders if he is actually being serious. Arwen asks him for one solemn promise. He must treat her as a knight, never as a woman. If he does, she will serve him. The two of them lock eyes in the silence, and Adrian gives her his word. The girl drops to one knee, swearing her loyalty to Prince Adrian Leonberg. She dedicates her sword and her entire life to His Highness. Valhard watches the scene unfold in silence. Adrian raises his blade, declaring that in his own name, she is now his knight. Time begins to pass, and the girl never stops her training. No one can believe she pledged herself to that fool prince. Some even whisper they have a secret relationship. Meanwhile, Adrian was listening to the rumors from afar. He wonders if his past self was some kind of villain. All the while, the knight by his side watches in silence. Soon after, he calls for the protagonist to discuss what was said on that day. Specifically, a few days back on the final day of the duel, Adrian asked if he was upset. It was the truth, after all. If orders ever came for him to go elsewhere, he would surely go. Even so, if he wished, he could make a vow later. The man clearly took it to heart, asking if he made that vow, would the prince accept it? But the boy quickly refuses, saying it wouldn't be interesting to train him. The knight just laughs, saying he understands, while Adrian remains serious. A bit later, our boy receives a letter. His suspension is over, and he must now attend the upcoming royal family banquet. He was released 6 weeks early. He remembers the last time the king visited. It seemed like the man never wanted to see his face ever again. He truly cannot fathom that man's logic. The knight asks if he is at least happy to be free. To Adrian, it makes no difference. Even if he leaves the palace walls, he has nowhere else to go. He knows no one and has no one to meet. Suddenly, another maid appears, announcing that yet another invitation has arrived for His Highness. Adrian takes the parchment. He asks about this social club intended only for the sons of the high nobility. What a ridiculous name. The maid explains he was already a member, but the protagonist suspects it is a very strange place indeed. One look at the girl's face tells you everything you need to know, right? It is nothing but endless parties and heavy drinking. Adrian decides to ignore it. He is much too busy training. However, looking closer, he sees it was sent by a friend named Bernardo from the house of Eli. At that same time, Adrian remembered his uncle mentioning that the house clinging to the heart of Etha until their last breath fell nearly a century ago. Shockingly, this was that very family. If so, attending the gala is a must. He could only hope their current state wasn't as wretched as the rumors suggested. 4 months after waking in the body of the rogue prince, he had been training relentlessly, shedding weight with every passing day. And truly, to be fair, the man looked completely different now. He had become strikingly handsome, almost unrecognizable to his peers. Adrian noted his weight loss, and the tailor beside him agreed, stating his measurements had shrunk by more than half already. Adrian told him to prepare his gala attire last, knowing his physique would likely change again before the night of the ball. Time flew, and the prince was finally heading to that so-called elite assembly. Honestly, I think that name is just absolutely dreadful. Inside the carriage, our lead realized that being a prince is an incredibly draining and exhausting position to hold. The forced smiles, the cramped carriages, the endless escorts, it felt suffocating. Then, looking to his side, he noticed something. He began staring at the maid, asking her plainly what had caused the visible wound on her shoulder. She claimed it was her own incompetence, something Her Highness should certainly have no reason to regret or remember. Adrian saw through it instantly. This prince's past was a gold mine of tragedy. He had seen this maid countless times, yet realized he didn't even know her name. He asked for her name, and she softly replied that she was 𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒂𝒂, a family that barely remained on the noble registers. Adrian recalled an era before kingdoms or cities, when the weak were simply prey. Back then, it was common for humans to be robbed and slaughtered. It was a dark, lawless age for the species. Then came those who ended that misery, leading humanity to dominate the continent. They were known as the 5 High Electors, 5 legends who changed the course of human history forever. One of those heroes had remarkably held him as a sword to slay the giant king, bringing an end to the long era of exploitation. One of those legendary figures who achieved such glory was the Lady of the Iron Blade, known as Agnes Byron. It was amusing because that girl swore like a sailor while fighting. Just thinking about it made him feel slightly uneasy. Regardless, the maid was likely a descendant, making him wonder how a noble bloodline could have fallen so far from grace. A knight announced they had reached their destination. Without wasting any time, the prince stepped out, telling 𝒂𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒂 he wished to speak with her further very soon. The girl was baffled. Suddenly, someone called out to him. Lord Bernard of House Ely was there to welcome the prince to the gathering. Honestly, the man seemed far too delighted to see the prince again. Hearing the name, Adrian wondered if this was the descendant of the famed Ely lineage. Bernard remarked on how much the prince must have suffered to lose such weight. In response, Adrian simply offered a cold smile. Bernard asked if something was wrong. Adrian replied he was glad he came, as this was bound to be a very entertaining day. The man was utterly confused. The scene then shifts inside to that dreadful social club. Honestly, it did not look like a place for the younger generation at all. Sitting on the sofa, Bernard found it strange. Normally, the prince would have already been flirting with every noblewoman in the room. His entire aura had shifted. Suddenly, a nobleman nearby stood up, mentioning he heard His Highness had finally conquered the flower of the Iron Lion Citadel. Rumors are spreading everywhere. Adrian just glared. The man continued, saying the lady looked stunning in armor and likely even better without it. The prince calmly asked if the man had any siblings at home. The noble replied he had a sister. In that exact moment, the protagonist delivered a brutal punch right to the man's face. Everyone was stunned. Adrian remarked that it was lucky he had a sister, so his family name wouldn't die out. Then he delivered a brutal kick. Even I felt that blow. The prince then declared that from this day on, his sister would be the family heir. He continued beating the man. Unbelievably, the crowd just stood there and watched, too afraid to intervene. The noble begged to know why. Adrian told him to listen very closely to his words. He did not care if the world called him a bastard, but he refused to be treated like one. The crowd was horrified, but Adrian simply continued the assault. The man was tossed aside, looking like he was at death's door. Adrian called out to Bernard, reminding him of what he said. Today would be a very fun day. Bernard was speechless at the lunacy. The prince then coldly ordered them to summon the royal knights without wasting another single moment. The man obeys Prince Adrian's command, leaving the entire hall in a heavy, awkward silence. The prince then addresses the ladies, coolly informing them that they are free to depart. Of course, one noble wasn't pleased. Just as he moved to protest, Adrian snapped that his order to leave only applied to the women. Look, if he wants to go, he can, but he'll be walking out of here as a woman. That silenced the room. Adrian points out that none of them even bothered to kneel, failing to show the basic respect due to a prince. They laughed in his face, and to make it even worse, they dared to insult his sworn knight. Now, he wanted to know exactly what charges he could bring against them. Suddenly, his guard appears, declaring that insulting a royal is a direct crime against the crown. Worse yet, defying royal authority is considered high treason. The guards ask His Highness for the command to arrest the offenders and drag them to the dungeons. The prince just smiles and says he wants every single one of them. A bit later, Adrian stands before the king, who snaps that his suspension had barely ended before he sparked yet another massive political uproar. 14 noble sons were detained. Adrian brushed off every lecture, simply asking the king if he was actually worried about how the great houses would react to the news. Besides, their families had already cast them out. Keeping those failures around would only bring further shame to their noble names. Those boys are lost causes, so just send the letters to their families. The old king falls silent, eventually giving Adrian the nod to take his leave. Later, Adrian tries to soothe a trembling maid, telling her she has nothing to fear. The poor girl shakes, wondering if she committed some grave error. Adrian realizes that the previous prince must have been a total monster to this girl. Not even the direct bloodline remembered the Valerius arts. Their history of glory was erased, and their legendary combat style was lost. Their prestige and pride vanished completely. Yet, shockingly, this servant girl possesses some very impressive combat potential. She carries the war frenzy trait. In fact, her abilities perfectly mirror that legendary female warrior from the ancient annals. Adrian worries she can't control that inner madness. He wonders if it's safe to unleash such a force upon the world. But it's worth a shot. She has S-rank potential, and by some miracle, she possesses a specific trait he can actually use. Specifically, she possesses a trait known as the devoted spirit. It's a rare quality, where she finds genuine fulfillment in serving a master with absolute, unwavering loyalty. Without missing a beat, our prince asks the girl to swear her eternal loyalty to him. She's confused by the sudden request, but Adrian clarifies. He wants her as his personal knight, and she must swear the oath immediately. The maid drops to her knees, claiming she isn't worthy of such an honor. Adrian counters, reminding her that she called her family unremarkable. If that's the case, he will take full responsibility for her future. In exchange, she must serve as his loyal knight. He thinks that if she can't control her madness alone, he will guide her through it. The girl asks if he truly intends to protect her family as well. Adrian promises to bring them to the capital so she can see them anytime. Overwhelmed with joy, the poor girl doesn't hesitate for a single second before responding. She gives her oath of fealty, vowing to serve him and devote her entire life to his cause. Adrian accepts, declaring that from this moment on, she must obey his every command without question. The pact was sealed, yet Adrian still felt a flicker of doubt, wondering if he'd made a mistake. But only time will tell if he's right. Whispers spread that the crown prince was back to his old tricks, supposedly forcing a knight's oath through manipulation and unfair leverage. They say he summoned noble heirs just to beat them and toss them into the dungeon. Worse, he's knighted a common maid who's never even held a sword. People assume he's just building a personal harem disguised as a royal guard. Adrian remains totally unfazed, merely wondering why the whole kingdom is suddenly so obsessed with his private life. He simply took on a personal knight, yet everyone has been breathing down his neck since the crack of dawn. The gossip is spreading like wildfire. Just then, his new knight enters to announce that the Queen Mother has arrived. She sighs, saying she hoped he had changed, but it seems he's determined to return to his wicked, old habits. Still, it might be amusing. Once she arranges a marriage to settle him down, her dull days will finally be over. She tells him to trust his mother, promising to find him the perfect bride this time around. She sweeps out with total confidence, leaving Adrian wondering what on earth is even happening anymore. Shortly after, Adeline approached the young lord, wondering if she too could ever harness the power of mana. Arthur confirms it, knowing she possesses a unique spark. He muses that while the world forgot the Sword Empress, he certainly hasn't. In truth, he remembers everything, from the grace of her stride to the lethal rhythm of the blade in her grip. Suddenly, a faint glow surrounds the girl, as the inner system detects a surge of raw mana within her spirit. The energy binds to her soul, and a notification confirms that a mana heart has successfully been forged within her. Arthur explains that this was a rare refinement technique for her mana heart. He tells her she must now practice this method on her own whenever she has a spare moment. Just then, the young noble begins to stumble, cursing his own weakness for being exhausted after forging such a simple mana heart. Adeline rushes to his side, asking why he would risk his own health for a common servant like herself. Arthur brushes it off, telling her he is fine and she may go. He then notices her intense gaze and asks why she is staring. Without hesitation, the girl bows low, swearing to serve him with her very life until her final breath. The young master smirks, reminding her to never forget who she serves. He walks away, secretly fearing that one day she might actually forget his kindness. Days go by before the captain reports that Baron Bernard is being detained by the royal guard as a witness to the recent chaos. Apparently, he is held in isolation until the trial begins. Arthur asks if he must testify too, but the knight explains that those of royal blood are never summoned to the witness stand. Meanwhile, the maid continues her duties, and Arthur asks how she has been feeling lately. Specifically, he wants to know if her mana heart has finally stabilized, and she confirms that it has. Since she is ready, he orders her to join his daily training sessions. He tells her to change into proper gear and meet him at the grounds immediately. It is high time she ditched those servant rags, do you not agree? Moments later, the young lord arrives at the arena, where Sir Valerius demands to know what on earth he is planning. Arthur claims he is only warming up, but the knight is clearly pointing at the girl. Our hero admits the rumors are true, confirming his plan to turn a mere maid into a knight. His enraged uncle snaps, asking if the title of knight has become a joke to him. Adeline appears, reporting that she has finished her 10 laps around the field. While Valerius fumes, Arthur ignores him and tells the girl to draw her steel. Today, he will begin teaching her the fundamental stances of the blade. He begins by demonstrating the basic forms, instructing the girl to mirror his every move. She grips the hilt, and trust me, her entire expression changes the moment she feels the steel. Valerius is stunned by the display, while Arthur is shocked that she perfectly mimicked his form after seeing it only once. The girl innocently asks if her form is correct, while Arthur realizes that if he slacks off, she will surely surpass him in no time. Her nature is simple. She bows to the powerful but holds zero respect for the weak. He remains cautious, knowing how she was treated in the past. If he lets her become stronger than him, there is no telling what might happen. Meanwhile, Valerius has a change of heart, admitting he had no clue the girl possessed such raw talent. But Arthur quickly cuts him off, telling his uncle not to get the wrong idea about her. Valerius wonders what Arthur could possibly teach her, given he is a novice who only picked up a blade a few months ago. To put it simply, he believes Arthur is incapable of handling such immense potential. Our hero falls silent, thinking of the terrifying aura he once held, one that would make anyone tremble and flee. But unfortunately, he is currently restricted by this frail body. He scoffs, knowing if he cannot handle her, then no one can. After all, he has personally crushed countless souls in his past life. The demonic sword called Gruhan flashes in his mind, and right then, the system interface reappears. The system warns that a fragment of his old soul is manifesting through his sheer will. Suddenly, that legendary dragon-slaying skill awakens within him once more. Valerius can only watch, frozen, unable to move a single muscle. This is starting to feel like a clash of wills. Arthur, cool as ice, simply declares that the girl belongs to him. Quite frankly, he detests it when people touch his property. Meanwhile, his uncle stays dead silent. In that instant, the boy slips into a trance, as his very sense of reality begins to fade away. He realizes with dread that if this continues, his frail body will be completely consumed by the dark soul of the sword, Gruhan. A mental doorway swings open, and spectral hands lunge toward him. Yet, he still does not move a single muscle. Reality snaps back as his uncle notes that while a common knight can save 10 soldiers from death, a legendary knight can save over 100 lives. But that girl there might be capable of saving 1,000 soldiers, or perhaps even more. He wraps up the explanation, but the girl stands firm. She declares her body and soul already belong to his lordship, and she will never betray his commands. Right. The man falls into a stunned silence. Adrian smiles, realizing that bringing her soul along was worth it because a loyal heart is bound to serve a higher power. Shifting gears, he asks Lord Valerius why he is still lingering at the palace, given that his only original goal was to shed a few extra pounds. If he wants to keep visiting the royal grounds, he needs to stop meddling in other people's private business right now. Surprisingly, the man agrees to the terms. Even after that encounter, the uncle keeps returning to the palace just to keep a watchful eye on young Adele. He was helpless now, since complaining and interfering were strictly forbidden by their pact. Adrian finds it hilarious to see his arrogant uncle humbled like that. Suddenly, a strange glowing aura begins to swirl around the girl's training sword. Both of them are completely stunned by the sight unfolding before their eyes. Adrian wonders if she has already mastered the legendary art known as blade resonance. Delighted, he tells her she has done a brilliant job, thinking that if she keeps progressing at this rate, she might actually surpass him. Just then, his furious uncle demands to know if he truly taught her the soul core technique. Wasn't it bad enough for him to waste time learning such a trivial skill? Hearing that insult, our hero simply glares at the man and tells him to leave. His uncle leaves disappointed, claiming there was a much better path for her. He laments that Adrian has ruined potential beyond his wildest imagination. Fed up with the drama, our boy orders the guards to escort his uncle out, but the man insists on leaving on his own. Once things quiet down, Adele asks if her new technique is truly trivial. Adrian immediately reassures her that the man is dead wrong. He explains that people in this modern era have completely forgotten what a true soul core can really do. If they hadn't lost that ancient knowledge, they never would have tossed it aside like common garbage. In time, she will see the real power of this gift. A day passes, and Adrian is shocked to see him back. The man proposes a test. He will use only a single chain, and if Adrian can pressure him even slightly, he will finally acknowledge his strength. Our hero draws his sword, asking about the stakes of their previous wager, which promised a wish to whoever came out on top. Lord Valerius says that if he loses, he will grant him absolutely anything. Even if he asks to learn the secret family arts, he will comply. However, Adrian says that isn't his goal. That is enough for now. In an instant, he lunges at the old man, who dodges the strike with ease. Lord Valerius, oozing confidence, notes that he was aiming for the throat. He remarks that the boy still wields a very cruel blade. Our hero tries the same move again, looking incredibly focused on his target, right. He continues the assault, but Valerius blocks the strike with a simple swing, asking if that is all the boy has. The young knight remains silent as he quickly puts some distance between them. Valerius asks if he has already quit. Adrian thinks his uncle is annoying, but admits he is powerful. He is waiting for the man to release his energy so his eventual defeat feels even more crushing. Concluding that, with only this level of soul core, the man will definitely lose. Suddenly, the boy changes the subject and asks if it isn't strange. He mentions that 400 years ago, great knights with soul cores achieved legendary feats. But once a simpler technique appeared, the powers of those masters were suddenly treated like trash. Everyone seems to believe the binding chain technique is a far superior way to control energy than the soul core. Hearing this, Lord Valerius asks where he is going with this, and Adrian says his perspective is quite different. To put it simply, It wasn't the soul core that was weak, it was the men who used it. Not all soul cores are equal. He asks his uncle if he has ever heard of a chivalric verse. The angry man snaps back, saying this is a place for combat, not for singing some idiotic nursery rhyme. Adrian expected that response, since his uncle calls the soul core a low-level skill only fit for common mercenaries to use. Adrian summons his energy and recites the ancient chant. The path a knight walks becomes their legacy, and without victory, there is no pride or power. Achievements are etched into the heart, and those deeds become a chivalric verse that dwells within the steel of the knight's sword. Suddenly, the system announces that a chivalric verse has been forged. The boy realizes this is the result of 6 months of intense training, proving that this is the true power of the soul core. The boy is glowing with power now. Valerius scoffs, saying that no matter what he does, the final result stays the same. As long as he uses that core, he will never be able to overcome the current. Ignoring him, Adrian charges headfirst at his uncle. They say elven essence has the power to reverse the very flow of mana within the heart. The lad was clearly struggling, while his uncle stood there unbothered, mocking him for stubbornly enduring the pain like a total fool. But the boy just smirks, remembering what it took to claim this ancient verse. He fought over 100 duels and survived elven pressure 1,000 times. This power was forged for one reason, to crush a knight of the currents. Suddenly, a massive explosion erupts. That right there is the true devastation of the dual verse. Now the real battle begins. Without a second of hesitation, the two warriors clash blades and go on the attack. Adrian feels the tide turning, wondering exactly how long his uncle can survive this onslaught. His uncle finally coats his blade in aura to strike back. Adrian retreats as the older man struggles to comprehend how this is even happening. Adrian reminds him that he already warned him not all mana hearts are equal, but the man refuses to listen, calling the boy purely arrogant. Shortly after that, he lunges at the boy, slamming him into the stone wall and declaring that playtime is over. Honestly, surviving this long was already impressive. He finally earned his respect. As Adrian collapses to the ground, he realizes that a standard knightly canticle simply won't be enough to win. He forces himself up, remembering that 400 years ago, the ancient knights made a lethal error. They left no enemies for their children, though their secrets were likely passed down perfectly at first. The secret techniques, the heart-refining methods, and even the glorious verses of old were once whole. But time eroded those legendary feats, until they were eventually lost to history and forgotten. Ballads of unseen dragons and forgotten giant kings eventually turned into nothing but hollow myths. But of course, there was more to the story. New knightly verses could be written, but they would never match the raw power of the true heroes of old. Back in the fight, Adrian shouts that a basic technique like the single stream will never reach true transcendence. His opponent scoffed, admitting that he had not understood a single word the boy had been rambling about. Adrian views Lord Valerius as a blinded, arrogant knight. It was high time these modern warriors realized exactly how much knowledge they had lost. If he remains ignorant, Adrian will personally demonstrate the true might of one who wields an 𝑩𝒂𝒔𝒄𝒅. He begins another sacred chant, but the system alerts him that his current skills cannot handle a verse of this magnitude. He could only manage to recite less than a quarter of the ancient phrase. The part about rending dragon scales. Even so, it was enough for Adrian to charge his uncle, who barely managed to block the blow. Now the uncle was the one struggling, fearing that if the battle continued this way, he would eventually be consumed. Suddenly, a massive blast erupts, sending Adrian flying backward through the air. Through the thick smoke, his uncle still stood tall. Adrian just watched, asking if the man had not promised to use only one ring. He realized that even after activating all 4 of his rings, he still could not prevent his sword from being shattered. The boy stands again. Lord Valerius always believed it was a fact that heart mana was far inferior to the power of the stream. But today, that theory was dead. Adrian simply stated that Lord Valerius had been defeated. As time passes, it becomes clear the boy is suffering from a deep, internal injury. Adrian tosses in his sleep, groaning that this agony is the cost of using the verse. This is the price for forcing the nightly canticle far beyond its natural limits. After all, the dragon slayer's verse is of mythic rank. His heart is shattered now, but he knows the sacrifice was worth the victory. It was the first nightly verse he had ever crafted alone. And he will continue to stand firm against even greater challenges. Lady Adelia suddenly appears, thrilled that he finally woke up. She mentions the massive commotion after he fainted, saying she had never seen his mother look so nervous before. Also, Valerius asked to be notified the moment Adrian woke, but the boy tells her to wait, as he desperately needs a bit more rest. He was truly suffering the consequences of invoking that powerful verse. He knew that if he did not heal his fractured spirit after overusing the nightly canticle, he would eventually pay a truly horrific price. Past memories and the present will tangle together until the very boundary of his reality collapses into total, irreversible madness. Victims eventually descend into insanity, endlessly reliving their glory days within a twisted, broken world. To think he finally became human, only to be imprisoned again by the echoes of a sword. And with that thought, months pass and Adrian notes that Lady Agnes of Byron was a legendary blade, and as her descendant, Adelia might inherit her lost nightly verse. The girl is shocked to have such a legendary bloodline. Adrian warns her that to be worthy of that verse, she must grow much stronger. Adrian asks what she plans to do once she has finally mastered the art of the sword. Hearing that, the girl falls silent. She clearly has no idea what she truly wants. Adrian says if she cannot think of it now, she can simply tell him later on. Then, the young girl says she will continue to serve as his sword. Adrian is stunned. He muses that while some legends start with a trumpet blast, others begin with that first step into a long war. Yet there are chivalric poems born from a sincere oath. Suddenly, the system announces that Adelia was offering a poem of submission to her master. Our boy wonders if that was meant to be her unique chivalric verse. Such a poem can influence others. The system then confirms that a brand new chivalric poem has been forged in that moment. Look at that massive tree, my friend. That one belongs to the common class. Adrian explains that the poem of submission is a hymn for a master, a vow of loyalty binding their souls despite its servant-like nature. Honestly, nobody expected a descendant of the legendary Sword Queen to ever offer a poem of total submission. It seems he has gained some unexpected help. He realizes that as long as she follows him, Adelia's growth will also grant him great benefits. The boy thanks her, even though he still has no clue how these mystical benefits will actually manifest in the future. A few days pass, but our protagonist does not seem very happy with his current life. His 2 knights simply remain silent while his mother asks if he is feeling well today. He quickly says yes. He thinks dealing with enemies who hate him is simple, but being around people who loved the original prince is far more awkward. Soon, his mother asks if he still holds a bitter grudge against his own uncle. She says he never meant to hurt him. Even if Adrian feels some resentment, he really should try to let it all go now. Adrian says he is fine, but his mother nervously points out he was quite rude and complained about every little detail. She thinks he must be lying about his anger, but the boy stays calm, knowing he already dealt the man a crushing blow that day. Since his uncle's pride and convictions were denied, it must be nearly impossible for him to endure the shame. In short, he planted a heart demon in his uncle. If the man survives it, he might actually make an even greater leap forward. To be honest, he really does not care what happens next. His mother mentions that his uncle lived closer to the blade than others, which is likely why he was always such a rough man. Still, he must like the prince, seeing as he went out of his way to personally persuade His Majesty the King. It was thanks to his uncle that his confinement was ended much earlier than expected. But since trouble started the moment he was freed, His uncle's position in the court must be very difficult right now. Hearing this, Adrian realizes why the man had been acting so strange. Regardless, he wants to know why a man like that would help him. Later, an old man appears with a stack of books. Adrian admits he hates this part of royal life from the bottom of his soul. The boy immediately starts throwing a tantrum, demanding to know why he has to study these books. The tutor says that a person who does not seek knowledge is no different from an animal. Furious, Adrian asks if he is being called an animal. The tutor notes His Highness has just begun his studies and cannot be ranked yet. He boldly claims he already knows everything necessary and insists there is no reason for him to learn anything else at all. The scholar suggests a deal. If the prince can prove his vast knowledge, he will never come back to bother him again. He asks to debate several topics. If His Highness's skills are truly as great as he claims, the tutor will never bother him again. Adrian accepts. A bit later, he remarks that one must always be wary of those behind them. Because naturally, if you grant people too much freedom, they walk all over you. I do not understand anything anymore. The old man says it is fine and hands him a book. The two continue the dull lesson as the long afternoon hours slowly pass by. With the work finished, the tutor says they will continue the talk tomorrow. Surprisingly, Adrian actually seemed to enjoy the debate. Minutes later, he realizes what he was doing and that it was just a normal lesson. Honestly, that old scholar is incredibly clever. Meanwhile, the gentleman was shocked, thinking the prince is nothing like the dark rumors suggested. A day passes and our boy is lying on his bed, bored to death. He wonders if he has been too diligent lately, as he has nothing to do without training. Adelia enters, announcing Lord Valahard. Adrian is thrilled to finally have a visitor. He asks the maid to let him in, assuming several days have passed. It had been quite some time since their last duel, but when he looks at the man, it is clear he has been through hell. He looks broken, still haunted by the inner demon that took root in his soul. The warrior remains silent before offering a shocking and unexpected apology to the young lord. He had broken his oath. His broken promise caused a grave injury. He feels that even 1,000 apologies could never truly justify the harm he inflicted upon the boy. However, Adrian knows his wounds were not from his uncle's aura blade, but from the strain of forcing himself to use the dragon-slaying poem. He recalls his mother's warning. Because of the trouble he caused, his uncle's situation at court must be very complicated now. Meanwhile, the uncle feels wretched, asking what the boy would want from him as compensation. He even offers his own arm or eye to settle the debt. Naturally, the boy refuses. He asks why he would want such a thing, knowing the man was once a legendary master of the blade. Now, he is crippled by a mere mental block and a heavy heart. So, the kid decides to be generous. He claims his first wish right then, asking for permission to finally leave the palace grounds. Valhard explains that his house arrest is over. He can go out whenever he wishes. But Adrian is not interested in a simple day trip. He wants to go much further, specifically beyond the walls of the capital. The Count notes that arrangements take time, especially with the upcoming royal banquet drawing near, so they cannot stray too far. Adrian dismisses the concerns immediately, insisting that the schedule is not an issue for him at all. Once everything is settled, the old man promises to send word. He exits the room, leaving the young lord to ask his knight why he is staring at him strangely. The knight admits it was unexpected, as he thought His Highness would demand something far more irrational and chaotic. After all, the Count broke his word. In many ways, this was a rare opportunity for the young lord. Yet, Adrian admits that seeing the stubborn man, so humbled, made him feel a little pity for him. The knight laughs at that, but Adrian warns him he is becoming far too comfortable in his presence lately. Suddenly, Adelia arrives with the letter he had been eagerly waiting to receive from the outside world. It is from Arwen. She claims to have achieved a great feat and believes she might be able to visit him very soon. She hopes he stays safe until that blessed moment. Adrian smiles at the message, noting the perfect timing of her letter. 5 days later, the confirmation arrives. 2 more days pass before it is finally time for them to depart. A full week has gone by. Inside the carriage, the protagonist asks which noble territories they will be passing through. The uncle snaps back in his usual foul mood. He tells the boy to sit still and listen to the explanation properly. Their destination is the territory of the prestigious Count Ellen. It is the main weapons forge for the palace, boasting a rich iron mine and an elite blacksmith guild to refine the high-quality materials. It is no exaggeration to say that over half the royal weaponry is forged by that prestigious and blessed clan. Adrian realizes that, since his power level has risen so much recently, he desperately needs a real sword. Originally, he could just take a decent blade from the royal arsenal. But life is never that simple. The palace will not just hand him a weapon, as they have not forgotten his past recklessness, my friend. Given his wild track record, their caution is only natural. If he wants a true blade, he must find it elsewhere. Luckily, Valhard is surprisingly mindful of this situation. Thus, their 20-day journey was finally about to begin. They will stop at Count Ellen's lands, 3 days from the capital, then trek to Iron Lion Castle, 2 days further. After that, they will head back to the capital, once they have recovered from the exhausting journey. Adrian has been stuck inside that carriage for 3 whole days, without moving a single muscle. His companion is incredibly boring, so the boy decides to focus on examining his own mana heart instead. His core is currently empty, as a side effect of the dragon magic. But it is time to recover. He can feel everything, from the softest breeze to the voices of the nights outside. By gathering the tiny fragments of mana hidden all around him. Miraculously, he succeeds, but things have changed. His mana heart is now significantly larger than it was before. The system alerts him that he has achieved a miracle and touched a fragment of a divine will. Julian believes this is the cost of pushing the dragon chant too far. Right then, the system confirms he has finally attained the rank of Master Knight. His link to the source deepened, finally unshackling his dormant powers. Consequently, his astral sight evolved, granting him a level of clarity he never had before. Without missing a beat, Julian inspects his own body, realizing his evolution has surpassed all expectations. We move now to Earl Elmsworth's lands, and wow, just look at the scale of that estate. Moments later, a man approaches, claiming it is an immense honor to host such nobility. He introduces himself as Edgar of House Elmsworth, standing alongside his stoic companion, Sir Thorn. Julian offers his sincere thanks. The man in the crimson uniform notes their long journey must have been draining and offers to lead them to their chambers immediately. As the prince wanders through the halls, he recalls that this estate is famous for its legendary armory. True enough, the manor is packed with various blades and shields. But they are just flashy, low-grade trinkets, useless on a real battlefield. It seems finding a true weapon here will be harder than he thought. Shifting focus, he asks if the renowned blacksmith's guild is located somewhere within these grounds. He wants to see it for himself. A few minutes later, the butler warns him that these master smiths are notoriously stubborn and quite foul-tempered by nature. When the hammer is falling, they ignore everyone, even a lord who comes to pay a visit. So even if their manners are lacking, he asks the prince for mercy, as it is simply the artisan spirit. Stepping into the forge, Julian is genuinely taken aback. The man notes the oppressive heat of the fires, telling the prince to speak up if the air becomes too thick. Julian watches in silence as the flames roar and the men strike the glowing iron. Yet, amid all that chaos, one clear sound rings out. The prince seems to recognize the rhythm, thinking to himself that this must be the place. After all, his oldest memory is one people often forget. He was once a sword himself. Right? Soon after, Lady Alina notes that His Highness is sweating profusely. But he just turns away, keeping his eyes locked onto the smith at the anvil. The smiths soon stop to introduce themselves and greet the Grand Prince. The butler points out the master who leads the entire guild. Meanwhile, One man alone continues his rhythmic hammering. An angry official demands to know what he is doing, ordering him to stop and bow. Julian simply tells the official to be silent. Looking at the apprentices, he can tell they were likely dragged here against their own will. He warns them the iron is cooling. If they want the fires to die, they should just keep standing there doing nothing. Without hesitation, Master Gerald resumes his work while Julian stays quiet. He simply cannot take his eyes off that stubborn blacksmith. And wow, that man truly is a force of nature. Julian sees something special in the young man, wondering exactly what this strange sensation could be. Later, the butler explains that for 6 months, the man has done nothing but forge and melt the same swords over and over. Julian asks if they were all failures, but the young smith does not seem to have an answer. Because every blade he produces is a masterpiece, he is already recognized as the guild master. To others, his blades are flawless, making it a complete mystery why he destroys them all. For an entire month now, he has barely slept at all, completely consumed by his intense labor at the forge. And since he is no longer a young man, they are deeply worried about his failing health. Hearing this, the only thing Julian can think is that the man is a true master of his craft. Days go by, and every morning the prince arrives early at the forge, staying until the dead of night. During that time, the old smith continues his grueling work, while Julian simply watches on in total silence. Despite the tension caused by rumors of the first prince's arrival, things stayed quiet. There were no incidents, which surprised everyone, but at last, the day of Julian's departure finally arrived. Even then, the prince kept watching the smith work. He mentions that he had hoped to see the final product before departing. But unfortunately, it seems that was not meant to be. Julian is genuinely disappointed, noting that since there is a farewell feast being held for him tonight, he will be forced to depart at the break of dawn. Time passes and dawn finally breaks. Suddenly, the butler appears, announcing that the master smith has finally finished his blade. Without a second thought, Julian rushes to the artisan, who is now carefully wiping down the finished sword. That weapon is truly worthy of being hailed as a masterpiece. The old smith drops to his knees before Prince Alaric, dedicating his final masterpiece to the young lord. Shock ripples through the crowd as Alaric reflects on the steel, claiming it needs only the sun fire and a cooling bath to match the king royal robes. Once polished to a brilliant golden sheen, a blade fit for a sovereign will be ours. Honestly, I am completely lost now. Alaric continues to study the blade, asking the old smith if it has a proper name. The craftsman suggests naming it Eventide, wondering if it represents the dying light of dusk or the first rays of dawn. For me, it is merely the sunset, but for your grace, it shall be the sunrise. Hearing this, Alaric notes the smith speaks well for his age. Suddenly, the old man turns pale and collapses, whispering that he can finally rest now that the work is finished. Without a second delay, our prince rushes to his side, deciding they must stay at the forge one more night. After that, as time passes, Alaric tends to the dying smith, who claims the sword truly took its shape the moment the prince stood behind him. The blade chose its own birthday, and Alaric asks if that is really how he sees things. Leaning in, he whispers a secret we cannot hear. He probably confessed that he used to be a sword himself in another life, right? Hearing those words, the old man laughs, saying the boy might even be a god. Now he truly understands everything, asking to hold the sword one last time. Taking it, he prays this blade grows to be as magnificent as its legendary wielder. Clasping the old man's hand, our protagonist promises that the sword will fulfill its destiny without fail. And just like that, the old smith passes away. At least he died with honor, having completed his final great work. A short while later, the sacred weapon was carefully wrapped and prepared for travel. The butler admits he cannot truly value a blade forged from another weapon, but fears it might be beneath His Highness' royal status. He offers a different enchanted blade instead, begging the prince to accept the gift. Alaric is taken aback by the sudden offer. He notes it is a fine weapon, thinking it is easily a high-tier mid-grade blade, even if not truly legendary. However, a blade forged by a master who poured his soul into the steel is a gift beyond any measure. Besides, he had already intended to present him with a magic sword. Realizing his mistake, the butler immediately sees the awkward position he has put himself in. He had no choice but to accept the loss, realizing he tried to trade for the smith blade using bait, but simply ended up giving both away. Man, he really blew it. Before long, the entourage was packed and ready to return to the capital city. Our hero watches in silence. Soon, Commander Valerius orders them to prepare for a fast ride, hoping to reach the Iron Lion Castle before the sun sets. But then, our prince casually mentions that he does not know how to ride a horse. Everyone is stunned, but how could he know? After all, he spent his previous life as a literal sword. Eventually, they set off, though the protagonist seems to have run into a few minor issues. Luckily, things worked out. Even if it took twice as long as expected, they reached the fortress in about a day. There stood the legendary citadel of the Iron Lion. Suddenly, a large group of armed soldiers appeared at the gate. A knight steps forward, announcing that Sir Julian of House Ashford greets the honorable first prince. Observing the tension, Alaric notices something is off. These soldiers look furious, and there is clearly a dark reason for their anger. To stir the pot, our protagonist begins to provoke them, calling out for Lady Alara. The lady returns the greeting, claiming she has been counting every single day until she could see him again. Suddenly, the crowd boils with pure hatred, wanting to tear him apart. Strangely, the same dark energy washes over Lady Adelaide. Noticing the shift, Alaric reaches out and places a steady hand on the girl-trembling shoulder. She calms down immediately. It was wise to test her loyalty early. Turning his attention back, Alaric calls out to Alara. He tells her to follow him, as they have many important matters to discuss in private. He thinks it would be even better if those guards came along, too. Later, the prince draws his sword, stating he wishes to witness the legendary Iron Lion style that everyone claims is the best in the land. He asks who among them is brave enough to face him. As the soldiers argue, Alaric watches, promising that his royal status should not be a burden. He swears on the name of House Lancaster that no one will face charges for the duel outcome. Still, will no one step up? Who knew the famous Iron Lions were actually such a pack of cowards? Finally, a soldier accepts the challenge. That hot-headed redhead over there is a man named Sir Gawain. He is barely fit to wield the blade of House Iron Lion. Still, if allowed, he dares to face your highness in combat. But Adrian claims there is no cause for concern since he issued the challenge. He refuses to waste another precious second. The soldier lunges forward, but the boy remains eerily calm as he parries the strike with his own blade. The red-headed knight struggles to hold his ground. With effortless grace, the boy sends him flying across the training yard. Gods, that Mana heart is terrifyingly strong. Adrian does not hesitate, calling for the next challenger to step into the ring. Another guardsman tries his luck against our hero, but he quickly suffers the exact same fate as the last man. As the afternoon wears on, the boy continues to dismantle every single soldier who dares to challenge him in battle. Boredom starts to set in. Minutes later, the entire squad lies defeated, sprawled across the dirt in total and utter humiliation. Adrian is losing his patience. He is ready to test his steel against the elite knights of the Royal Guard. The prince calls for Lady Arwen, declaring that she will ride by his side when they return to the capital. She remains quiet but bows in silent obedience. Suddenly, a new soldier steps forward, claiming he heard Prince Adrian enjoys gambling. If those rumors are true, he wants to propose a wager to make this duel far more interesting for everyone. Adrian sees through the scheme and immediately shuts it down. He snaps that Lady Arwen is no common tournament prize. They should wager something else entirely. The prince draws his new blade, ready to put it on the line for this fight. He vows to hand over his masterwork sword if he loses. The onlookers gasp, shocked by the prince's reckless display of confidence. As the girl moves to protest, Adrian stops her. He whispers that she is worth infinitely more than any mere sword. To him, the worth of a true swordmaster could never be measured against mere steel and cold leather. The short-haired warrior accepts. He introduces himself as Sir Dunran of House Fahrenheit, a man on the verge of triple-current mastery. Adrian scoffs, noting that almost means he is still just a double-current warrior. Furious, Dunran brags that his blade is the 17th piece forged by the legendary swordmaster. If he wins, the sword belongs to the crown. Hearing this, Adrian chuckles at the strange and unexpected coincidence. Drawing his own weapon, he mentions that he too carries a gift from that very same legendary smith. This is the master's 100th masterpiece, but the soldier sneers, claiming no such legendary blade exists in any known rumor. Adrian simply replies that the master smith only finished the work a few short days ago. Flaring his mana current, the soldier admits that while the prince follows a flawed path, he can see the tireless effort in every strike. Out of respect for that dedication, he promises to give this duel everything he has in his soul. Adrian dismisses the sentiment as pure nonsense. It makes no difference anyway, since this place was never truly his to claim from the start. He declares that he only cares for the respect of those who truly serve him and no one else. Igniting his mana heart, he tells Adelia to watch closely. This is the arduous path she must walk from this day on. The girl's eyes glow with renewed purpose. She swears a solemn oath to fulfill every wish of her highness. Later, the scene shifts. Valhard asks how many times they have visited the Iron Lion Fortress. His companion confirms it has been 4 times in total. The 4th prince lacks any ambition for the crown, so he would never bother visiting this castle. Both the 3rd and 5th princes visited, while the eldest was confined. Even the 2nd prince made an appearance not long ago. Regardless of his stained reputation, no one could deny that the 1st prince remained the true heir to the entire kingdom. But for things to have spiraled this far, he must take a massive share of the blame and responsibility. Had the commander of the 3rd Legion offered even a shred of support, the prince wouldn't be so isolated. Why play his protector now? The man knows those words ring true. He did, after all, turn his back on his own nephew once before. The boy was more likely to become a cruel tyrant than a simple, incompetent ruler for the people. He once scolded the boy for being drunk on a foul elixir, only for the brat to draw steel against him in rage. The 1st prince was no mere fool. He was, quite simply, a hopeless and dangerous scoundrel with no honor. After returning north in disgust, his nephew sent him a cask of poisoned wine. The boy even had the audacity to call it a gift. While he used his mana to incinerate that vile toxin, he also burned away every last shred of affection he had for the boy. But the scoundrel he thought was beyond redemption has suddenly done the impossible and started to change. He is enduring brutal training and growing stronger every day. The man then asks if it wasn't Valhard himself who said the prince must never take the throne. But my friend, his uncle has already had a change of heart, believing the boy he sees now shares nothing with the villain of the past. Lord Valerius actually begins to plead, asking the Duke to grant the young prince a fair chance alongside the other heirs of the crown. Stunned, the Count is left speechless, wondering whether it was his own heart that changed or the character of the Crown Prince himself. Right then, a guard bursts through the chamber doors, and honestly, you just know this isn't going to end well. Later, as they pace the castle halls, the commander insists there is no need for worry since his elite knights understand their boundaries perfectly. Thus, no harm will come. He would never permit a royal to be struck down in a duel, regardless of the intensity. Yet the response is chilling. It is not the prince who is in danger, but his opponent. And there it is, exactly as predicted. Suddenly, the knight is thrown backward through the air with incredible force. The warrior lies broken upon the stone floor. The crowd watches in shock as His Highness claims yet another decisive victory. His companion stands baffled by the display, but Valerius simply reminds him that he had warned of this outcome earlier. Without pausing for even a moment, the young lord raises his blade and demands the next challenger step forward. A memory flashes back to the duel against the warrior, with the prince still locked in fierce combat. He realized his current battle chant was insufficient. Naturally, he could not unleash a dragon slayer technique upon a mere mortal knight. With that, he ignites his inner core, feeling as if his physical form no longer belonged to him. Incredibly, that familiar sensation returned. The boy was slipping into a state of profound, absolute focus. Their steel clashes with a roar, and snapping back to the present, the opponent is sent soaring through the air. Hours tick by as Prince Alaric continues to crush every guardsman who dares to stand against him. As dusk approached, the young noble had already bested a significant portion of the entire knightly order. He chants a battle verse, and his intuition tells him a new line has formed. His song of mourning had finally transformed into a true poem of war. At that exact second, the boy teetered on the edge of collapse. Yet a knight catches him, stating he wished to pay proper homage to the glorious victory achieved by His Highness. The warriors offer a collective salute. Alaric is confused, remembering how these same men wanted his head just moments ago. Meanwhile, Valerius and his companion watch from the distance. The Lord remarks that these soldiers are simple men at heart. Noting that nothing stirs their blood anymore, save for the blade and the thrill of triumph. Valerius adds that the prince likely expected nothing but hatred from the men. However, in this world, a truly honorable defeat outweighs any kind of hollow win. In the end, the result itself is secondary. Hearing this, Alaric thought his old knowledge had vanished along with the power of his heart. Yet, it seemed one thing remained constant after all. Whether facing triumph or ruin, the true spirit of the knight remains eternal. Time passes, and Alaric prepares to return to his own kingdom, expressing his hope that they might cross paths again on a future occasion. With his business concluded, the young lord was about to step into his waiting carriage. He summons the count, requesting total secrecy regarding his visit. Lord William asks if publicizing such incredible feats would not benefit His Highness. However, the prince insists on discretion. He has a specific prank in mind for a certain someone back home. Shortly after, as the troops settle for rest, Captain Cedric announces he will go scout the surrounding perimeter. Meanwhile, Lady Alara watched him in silence, looking quite displeased. Alaric simply figured she would adjust to the situation eventually. Regardless, he needed sleep as well. Upon entering his tent, he found Adele waiting there already. The boy still struggled to process the fact that he had recruited a top-tier legendary genius. Yet here she was, performing menial chores like a common maid. The exhausted boy just wanted sleep, but Adele asked if something was bothering him. He brushes it off, realizing the Knights of the Iron Lion were far different than he had previously imagined. His magical appraisal revealed their swordsmanship barely reached the second tier at best. Yet, in the ages of old, they would have struggled to even reach a mediocre level. Even after decades of brutal conditioning, they were mere peasants destined to perish uselessly on the battlefield. But today, common men attain the status of master duelists in only 20 or 30 years. Essentially, the power of legends had waned, while the potential of the common folk had surged forward. This shift was likely due to the changing magical tides of the world. His uncle, a man who might have reached divine transcendence in the past, was clearly disgusted to see him squander potential. Yet, the current age offers no chance for one to achieve feats that transcend the ordinary limits of man. Ultimately, the times were to blame, and he had to confess his ignorance of this modern world. Because of that, he is forced to rethink his entire strategy from scratch. Right then, Lord Valhart steps in, praising his resolve. It is not too late, and with enough grit, he can still reach the heights he once dreamed of. He has already won over the elite Iron Lions. Noting that any other prince would have failed to lead them, it seems Prince Adrian made a truly brilliant move. What is this? The man is being far too kind. It is unsettling. Our hero cannot understand what has gotten into his uncle. He even wonders if the man has lost his mind, but his uncle just asks if he forgot their wager. The deal was simple: defeat a high-ranking knight and he would keep his word. Now Duke Valhart, commander of the 3rd Legion, officially pledges his blade to the young prince. Hearing this, our boy is floored, wondering when he ever mentioned he actually wanted to wear the crown. As the days passed, his uncle's bold declaration shook the entire kingdom like a thunderclap. Well-wishers were everywhere, but amidst the chaos, our hero was overwhelmed. This place is a disaster. He just wants them all gone. However, Karl explains they are here by royal decree, so they will not leave his side. If they must stay, Adrian demands they at least stay out of his sight. A moment of peace finally arrived, but as usual, it did not last very long. Suddenly, his brother confronts him, accusing him of treachery. He claims Adrian was secretly training in the sword under Count Valhart. He warns that Adrian has made a grave error, and he will pay dearly for this insult. The protagonist is speechless. After all, he never had any desire to sit upon that throne. At that exact moment, a memory flashes by. Adrian will play along for now, but he must prove he has zero interest in the crown. He asks why this was started without his consent. Valhart simply smiles, asking if he is worried. He is, after all, the great shield defending the realm from the mountain beasts. As long as the lords remember the sting of winter, the noble house will remain secure. In truth, it was only a matter of time before this conflict finally erupted. Does he not realize the fate of a firstborn who is cast aside? Hiding will not change his destiny. If he needs time to face his reality, he shall have as much as he needs. But he must remember, his claim to the throne only ends when he draws his last breath. Once his uncle leaves, Adrian mutters that no amount of time will ever change his mind. The only thing he truly desires is to regain his lost, transcendent power. He does not care about titles or succession, or at least that is what he thinks. Entering the banquet hall, the boy immediately senses the heavy, hostile tension in the air. Every eye is on him, including a mysterious hooded figure watching from the dark corners. The feast began, but there is a lingering feeling that something terrible is about to happen. Descending the grand stairs, Adrian looks at the crowd and wonders if these are truly the kingdom's elite. Most of them bear the viper's mark, the sign of those who crush lives and steal wealth without a second thought. Only a few are worth his attention, as the prince goes to greet Lord Taylor. The man admits they should have spoken sooner, even without great talent. The boy lacks corruption. That is enough. Today they shall become the ground where new seeds are planted. What a mess. Suddenly, a herald shouts the arrival of Ambassador 𝒂𝒔𝒕𝒂𝒓𝒅. What a mouthful. Every noble instantly bows to the old man, clearly a figure of immense power. The elder remarks on how long it has been, and upon hearing that name, Adrian freezes. He remembers. This is the very man they fought for years, 400 years ago. A name that left deep scars on the realm, yet he still dares to show his face. Suddenly, a clumsy noble trips, drenching our hero in wine from head to toe. The man panics and apologizes. Adrian stays calm, asking Karl who the man is. It is Marcus Bierfeld. Adrian whispers to himself, I suppose not everyone here is completely rotten. That actually helped him regain his composure. Moments later, Alistair was washing up. His uncle appeared, noting that Sir Marcus Belford was worried. Apparently, the young prince looked like he was ready to cause some serious trouble. The man wasn't wrong either. Alistair was truly on the verge of snapping. His uncle asked about his plan. Alistair replied he wasn't a fool, but there was still one glaring issue he just couldn't wrap his head around. The corrupt House Blackwood flaunts its influence in the capital, and the local lords seem to worship them even more than the crown itself. The air was too thick for peace, and the power dynamic was far too skewed to ever be called an alliance. He demanded to know how the kingdom fell so far. Valerius explained it was a long story. Years ago, the kingdom fought back against the empire's many invasions. Our brave knights stood tall to drive the enemy back every time. But as decades passed, the empire's might grew. The gap between them widened until they were facing a global superpower they simply couldn't match. Eventually, the crown had no choice but to surrender. Alistair listened, realizing that this was exactly where things went wrong. Even as a tiny realm on the edge of the world, 𝒂𝒔𝒅𝒏 once possessed a secret power that let it defy that massive imperial army. From its birth, the realm was built on legends and the sacred knight's oath. But over the years, those traditions and myths were completely forgotten. Suddenly, Alistair announced a change of heart. He declared, right then and there, that he intended to become the king. Valerius was stunned. Alistair knew he might regret this path, but it was a burden he had to carry. He had practically built half this nation with his own 2 hands, after all. A bit later, our hero returned to the banquet. Glancing around, he saw the lords looked deeply troubled. Alistair scoffed at their lack of manners. Even a common foreign merchant would get better treatment than this. He remembered how things were back then. When his old allies stood before the crowd, nobody dreamed he would wear a crown. Back then, he was just a simple boy from a tiny farming village. Yet, despite his humble roots, he stood before the masses exactly the way he was doing at this very moment. Alistair began to recite the ancient knight's oath. He thought that compared to the legendary dragon slayer's verse, this one was actually quite manageable. Still, there was no better way to command the room. This was the perfect anthem for this moment. Suddenly, a shimmering crown and cape materialized on the young prince. The room went silent as all eyes turned to him. Finally, the crowd dropped to their knees in respect. That was more like it. Alistair told them to rise, but in that instant, he sensed a strange, powerful energy radiating from across the room. Glancing to the side, he spotted a mysterious hooded girl. She lowered her hood, revealing she was an elf. She admitted her surprise that anyone still remembered the ancient chivalric verses of old. Alistair froze. He recognized her. He couldn't believe that crazy woman was actually standing here. They are called the gods' most beautiful creations, a gentle race that supposedly treasures even the smallest spark of life. The forest guardians who live 300 years, sometimes even 1,000. At least, that is how most humans view the elven folk. In truth, they are cold-blooded, using their beauty as a lure to destroy their enemies. The high elves are the worst of them, born with power that rivals legendary heroes. But the woman standing there wasn't just any common high elf. She was an ancient being who had lived nearly 1,000 years. Her name was Seraphina, a survivor of the party that killed the great dragon 400 years ago. Long ago, this girl became obsessed with claiming Alistair after her master fell. He wondered if she could somehow sense his true identity. She asked if they had met before, claiming he looked familiar. Alistair didn't hesitate. He just shook his head, lying that he had never even seen an elf in his life. She continued to study our hero. Alistair knew Seraphina was already a powerhouse 400 years ago during the Age of Blades. He dreaded to think what kind of unstoppable monster she had evolved into by now. She then mentioned that humans typically react to her kind in one of 2 distinct ways. Most mortals are instantly seduced by an elf's beauty. However, those who have reached true mastery usually keep their guard up, sensing the danger hidden beneath the surface. But from where she was standing, the young prince didn't look like he had achieved that level of skill. Alistair simply told her he had different tastes in beauty. Hearing that comment was definitely going to get under her skin, wasn't it? Pulling her hood back up, she said it was a pleasure to meet him, even if their encounter was brief. As she left, Alistair exhaled. He had managed to survive that encounter, for now anyway. Soon after, a crowd of noble ladies was paraded in for Alistair to choose from. Honestly, there was even a young child in the group. The situation was becoming a complete disaster. His mother started lecturing him, saying a future queen must be wise, virtuous, and 1,000 other exhausting things. Honestly, I couldn't stand it. That old woman just kept on rambling, and I couldn't take another second of her voice. Right then, a soldier rushes in with news. Apparently, a delegation of elves has arrived and is requesting an immediate audience with the royal court. And at that exact moment, someone else appears. That hooded girl from earlier steps forward, identifying herself as 𝒔 of the mistletoe tribe as she bows. She offers a formal greeting to the beautiful Queen Margaret, representing her people before the entire throne room. I only just learned the Queen's name myself. The elf speaks up, noting that it has been quite a while since her kind visited. She mentions that it has been a remarkably long time since any elf has visited the kingdom, and their sudden arrival here today is truly a surprising turn of events. Then, 𝒔 makes a bold claim. She asks if the rumors are true that Her Majesty is seeking a bride for the prince. Lowering her hood, she reveals her true identity as a noble high elf. By human standards, anyway. You could say she belongs to an ancient, noble lineage. And incredibly enough, her age isn't actually that different from yours, Your Highness. I see where this is going. She clearly knows that elves, who stay beautiful for centuries, are considered the perfect wives for human royalty. Told you so. She goes on to say that from the very moment she saw the prince, she felt their two fates had finally aligned. This is getting out of hand. Our hero is stunned. He knows elves never lie about destiny, so he wonders if she's being sincere. Meanwhile, Queen Margaret listens in total shock. The entire hall erupts into whispers, with everyone desperate to know if her claims are actually true. Without wasting any more time, Arthur takes the girl by the hand, insisting they speak alone immediately. A few minutes later, he calls out to her. He demands to know her real goal. She simply claims she wants to strengthen the bond between her people and the human kingdom. But Arthur isn't buying it. He decides to ask 𝒔, the high elf, one more time. He calls her an executioner, one who carries the heavy burden of her tribe's violent history. He asks if she's here for an investigation or an execution. Right at that second, her face changes. She asks how on earth he knows so much about her. Arthur stares in silence. He realizes she is a monster with power far beyond anything he can measure in his current state. If she truly sensed a destiny in him, her power must be high enough to see the past engraved upon his very soul. Then, the girl tells him that if he knows she's a killer, he should realize how stupid it is to stay silent in her presence. But the boy fires back. He knows all too well that talking too much to an executioner is just as dangerous and idiotic. Either way, she needs to stop this nonsense. He warns her not to meddle with his fate, betting that she's only acting out of a sense of curiosity right now. If this keeps up, a human's destiny might be wasted by a lunatic elf. If that's the case, he needs to provoke an even deeper level of interest. 𝒔 finally asks who he really is. He just tells her that currently, he's a pathetic prince who was even abandoned by his own father. And if she's still curious about the truth, she'll just have to wait and see for herself. That surprises her. She admits she knew something was off, as they never would have sent her on such a pointless mission otherwise. But now, she sees that everything was because of him. Our poor hero just wants to leave, thinking she is a truly unsettling woman. Soon, the scene returns to the hall where, incredibly, the two of them are holding hands. Standing before the Queen, Arthur makes a sudden announcement. He declares that he will officially accept the engagement with this elven girl. Man, things are escalating way too fast right now. He never imagined a day would come where he'd speak this girl's name with such a sense of familiarity. This is far too important to decide in a hurry, so he'll just watch how things play out for the time being. He thinks that while the Queen sees this as a long time for consideration, for 𝒔, it will just be the time during which she continues to mature. And for him, it's the time he needs to gain enough strength to finally escape from this crazy elf. A bit later, we shift focus to the other prince. He's furious, snapping that the only advantage Arthur has over him is that cursed birthright of his. Not long ago, his uncle pledged his support and took the prize of the Iron Lion Fortress. Now, the guy is even going after that elf woman. It doesn't matter anyway, because they have a duel scheduled very soon. It's clear the guy has some dark intentions. Soon enough, the moment of the duel finally arrives. That was quick. Our hero looks completely calm and ready. Then Prince Julian boasted about his grand preparations, even bringing a crowd to witness the spectacle for his brother. He claims he hates to let the crowd down. Adrian just sighs, noting that his brother always did talk far too much. Infuriated, the young royal charges straight at Adrian with everything he has. Adrian meant to take it easy on him, but he has no time for games lately. Within seconds, the prince is eating dirt. The entire courtyard watches the swift defeat in stunned silence. Even the knights are baffled, questioning if this is truly the same lazy first prince they once knew. With the fight finished, the victor of this duel is clear to everyone watching. Adrian wastes no time and departs immediately. Before long, word spreads like wildfire that Prince Julian suffered a humiliating defeat. Soon, the boy rouses, demanding his squire fetch his gear. He's determined to settle the score once and for all. Talk about persistence. But a knight reports that Adrian has already vanished from the capital, riding north with Count Valerius. He headed toward the northern reaches, the ancestral home of House Valerius. During the trek, Valerius notices the prince's improved riding skills. Adrian just shrugs, claiming it's a simple enough task. Changing the topic, the count asks why the lad was in such a frantic rush. The royal banquet only just ended. He should be resting for a bit, but Adrian simply replies that the capital holds no future for him. He won't linger among traitors who ignore their true sovereign just to lick the boots of the empire's lapdogs. Honestly, he feels more at home among battle-hardened knights than snobbish courtiers. His uncle warns him that knights aren't as cunning as lords, but they are far more traditional. As they ride, his uncle worries he's being far too reckless. Adrian remains silent, knowing if he delays, he will be forced to marry that madwoman. History shows that those who married into her house met grim ends. He must find power before that happens. To accelerate his growth, he knows exactly where he must go to become truly powerful. It is the place where every man is tested to his limit, the birthplace of all legends, the battlefield. Just then, Valerius points to the jagged peaks. These are the Blade Mountains, the frozen frontier his kin have guarded for generations. Our hero shivers in the biting frost, muttering that he better get used to this bitter cold quickly. Nearby, Arwen is also trembling from the chill. Adrian checks on her, but she insists she is perfectly fine. Adrian offers to let her switch with another rider if things get too difficult. She scoffs, saying no knight should ever prioritize comfort. Adrian is pleased to see at least one person in the group possesses genuine motivation. The rest of the lot just whine about being forced here by the king. If Carl were present, he'd have disciplined them already. A memory flashes back to the king, declaring that the royal guard does not serve as his private militia. That is why Carl couldn't follow them north. Despite the prince's past failures, he is still the king's own blood. Still, the king's cold attitude seems quite extreme. And there is obviously a deeper history there. Suddenly, Valerius urges them to pick up the pace before they get completely swallowed by the oncoming storm. Time slips away as the gale grows. Valerius orders them to abandon the carriages, take the horses, and proceed on foot. Adrian realizes the count used mana just to shout. Our hero calls out for Adelia, helping her dismount safely. Arwen checks if he's all right as the tempest begins to howl with even greater fury. Adrian, losing his patience, tells Arwen to watch over Adelia. He barks at the other fools to ditch their heavy shields. Gears like that will only let the wind carry them off. They must shed every ounce of weight besides their steel. Every stride through the snow is a struggle, and the men are reaching their limit. Men are beginning to lag behind in the drifts, and Adrian, returning to the rear, hauls a fallen soldier onto his shoulders. Good grief, the young prince is a total beast. They trudge onward toward their destination until, at last, the massive stone fortress looms ahead. Strangely, the blizzard vanishes the moment they reach the gates. The clouds part, and the sky clears as if the storm never existed at all. Valerius stands before the great gates. As lord of this domain and commander of the 3rd Legion, he officially welcomes the first prince home. The boy gazes around in awe. and his uncle formally welcomes him to Winter Castle. Winter Castle is a bastion in the far north, an ancient defensive line built specifically to hold back the demon hordes. For a common soldier, it is the worst possible post. Yet lords from every corner of the world constantly weigh the political power of this northern stronghold. To those born and raised within these walls, the fortress represents a lifetime of duty and pride. A man approaches, introducing himself as Sir Vicent, and announces that starting today, he is stepping down as acting leader to resume his post as commander of the Rangers. He adds how relieved he is that his father returned home safely. Lord Valahard commends his fine work. Adrian and I are both stunned, exchange looks, and wonder if the old uncle really had a secret son all this time. Looking closer, the family resemblance is undeniable. They truly do look like father and son. Even worse, they share the same stubborn personality. Lord Valahard turns to introduce the protagonist, presenting him as the young Prince Adrian. Bowing respectfully, the young man introduces himself as Vicent, a noble of House Valahard. Adrian peers down at the knight, greeting him with a polite, "Pleasure to meet you." Vicent is fuming inside. He believes the Winter Castle is a bastion for legendary warriors and noble sacrifice, not a playground for some exiled royal brat to wander around with his lady friends. Tensions are high thanks to this misunderstanding. Vicent demands to know why the prince even brought his father back to this frozen wasteland. He demands to know what on earth is going on. The Lord explains he has decided to act as the boy's mentor and will remain within the kingdom's borders for now. Confused, the son asks if they had not already cast the prince aside for being a fool. The old man simply looks away, claiming that men are destined to change. He has only one request. Vicent must observe the young prince fairly, putting aside all his previous prejudices. Days pass, and Lord Valahard checks on the progress of clearing the monster hordes from the local villages. Vicent reports they have been steadily thinning the enemy ranks. A few nests remain, but now that his father has finally returned, they are ready to launch a full strike. Adrian listens closely as the commander points out that their biggest current threat is a warband of orcs. A group of nearly 20 has camped at the mountain pass. At that number, it is hard for the Rangers to win with just arrows alone. They are currently handpicking knights from the keep, but Adrian interrupts, boldly claiming he will handle the entire mess himself. The captain warns that mountain orcs are far more dangerous than common ones. One mistake could jeopardize the entire ranger operation and the castle's safety. Hearing this, Adrian looks to his uncle, who asks his son for a full report on the orc strength. They have spotted 20 at most so far. While no shaman or elite warrior has been seen, they cannot rule out the possibility that one is leading the warband. Valahard asks if Adrian is truly confident. Vicent immediately chimes in, noting the pass is a vital route for their own scouts. If that path becomes a bloody battlefield, their future logistics will be a nightmare to manage. Any threat to the prince's safety would put Lord Valahard in a very precarious political position. Hearing the tactical breakdown, Adrian admits his uncle raised a sharp son. As they finalize the battle strategy, Vicent looks far from pleased with the plan. Shortly after, our hero relays the news to his personal squad of knights. He announces their mission to hunt down the orcs, noting there are 20 targets to eliminate in the wild. One knight tries to dodge the fight, claiming their only duty is to protect the prince as an escort. Adrian smiles, noting they will have to follow him into battle to do their job properly. With that settled, he leaves, realizing that like it or not, these are the men assigned to his house. He will have to whip them into shape to be useful. They do not look like much at first, but since they are house elites, they must have some value. Their combat skills should be decent, though some look suspicious given their strange backgrounds in interrogation and secret disguises. Right. Vicent himself steps up to guide the prince, warning the royal that he might be in over his head. If this mission fails, the consequences will be far worse than Adrian can imagine. The two maintain a tense, competitive atmosphere. Suddenly, a system alert flashes before Adrian, stating it is currently impossible to view the knight's status window. Adrian immediately realizes that the man is at least a high-ranking triple chain knight. Only one of the soldiers behind him is an actual ranger. The rest are clearly elite knights in disguise. They likely plan to take over if things get messy, but Adrian ignores them since they have no idea what he can do. The hunt begins immediately. As they march, Vicent warns them to move steadily and conserve their energy for the coming fight. If they exhaust themselves now, their limbs will freeze in the cold, and they will be useless in battle. As the knight continues his lecture, Adrian thinks the boy is even more long-winded than his father. Suddenly, a noise echoes. A soldier quickly pulls out a glass, spotting a larger group of orcs waiting for them ahead. Those monsters look far from friendly. The soldier turns back, asking for the next set of orders. Of course they were going to charge all at once. But right then, my friend, one of the orcs catches a glimpse of them. The entire unit stares at Adrian, who feels like an eternity has passed. Suddenly, a volley of arrows whistles through the air, burying themselves in the beasts. Meanwhile, Adrian unsheathes his steel. He leaps over a wild strike and plunges his blade deep into the creature. This is exactly what he has been longing for. The battlefield is his true home. Lady Arwen rushes in, shouting about the danger, but he tells her to stay back. Sword held high, his mind drifts back 400 years in time. Back then, the orcs weren't monsters. They were proud masters of these lands. This isn't a myth or a hero's legend. It's the song of a wretched man who despised the orcs. Adrian recites those ancient verses again, and suddenly, a massive aura erupts across the sky. Our young knight was ready. In a flash of memory, a redhead mentions how easily men die at Winter Castle. But Adrian tells him to relax. There won't be any reason to draw their swords today. He mocks what that useless prince could possibly achieve there. Surely, he'll just stay holed up in the keep, trying to steal all the glory from his noble uncle. The uncle is the real threat, not the prince. All he has to do is track every move at Winter Castle and report anything suspicious. Handing over a heavy purse of gold, he asks if the task is possible. The man boasts with total confidence. But back in the present, reality is far different. The carnage continues. The soldier trembles with terror, lost and confused. Desperate, he lunges at one of the creatures, only to be crushed in an instant. Suddenly, Lady Arwen strikes, felling the beast with ease. As the giant carcass hits the dirt, she warns him, "This is war, and you never lower your guard." The man nods, accepting the harsh truth, but there's no time to rest. The slaughter is far from over. Arwen orders the garrison to form up, wary of the massive horde approaching. It looks like their current forces simply won't be enough to hold back such a massive tide. But then a blade erupts right through a monster's chest. The soldiers watch in absolute shock. Our young hero was done playing around. Adrian stood right in the thick of those beasts, showing not a hint of fear. Wasting no time, he carves through more orcs. A memory flickers in his mind. No matter how many he slew, it was never enough. He was always hunting, always searching for his next foe. He wandered the desolate lands, ruled by the orcs, even after his inner magic had run dry. Yet the cursed warrior never stopped. With every single step he took, he grew more ancient and increasingly fragile. Only the dark blade in his grip kept him moving. To fulfill his final wish, he was burning through every last drop of his soul. He was just a man who had lost his entire world, his wife and daughter, to that vile race. Another cycle of blood and vengeance. By the time he finally found his lifelong enemy, he was already a broken shell of a man. Still, he limped toward the beast. But it wasn't enough to end the curse. Overcome by age and exhaustion, the old man collapsed onto the dirt. Yet he never surrendered. His was a secret tale, a story never whispered to another soul, and one that not a single person would ever know. He lived as a weapon back then. Now, he is the only witness to that forgotten life. Back in the present, the orcs are dead. At least on Adrian's side of the field, the threat is over. Elsewhere, the struggle continues. But as Adrian grips his hilt, the memories finally start to flood back. Specifically, it is the verse of vengeance, a song that was never truly finished. He has to complete the verse. Without a second thought, he storms toward the remaining orcs without stopping. Adrian was locked into the heat of battle. The system chimes as a new verse is added to his poem of vengeance. Reciting the lines, he declares he stands before these monsters to honor that man's soul. The system announces that the song of vengeance has transformed into a requiem. Glancing around, the carnage is over. Vincent snaps a banner, announcing that the orc forces have been wiped out. Victory is theirs. Adrian wonders if that man's name was really Vincent. That warrior from long ago threw his life away hoping to see the orcs destroyed. To think this man would share the exact same name. It's a strange coincidence, especially since the old man spoke of his next life. He will surely purge that entire race. Moments later, Vincent approaches with the crimson banner. He offers it to Lord Adrian, honoring the custom where the finest warrior claims the enemy colors. It is the ultimate spoils of war, a priceless trophy meant for the hand of our hero alone. Lady Althea calls out to His Highness, expressing her deep admiration for his legendary courage on the field. Every knight drops to one knee as the boy beams with pride. He lifts the standard, declaring their victory over the orc horde. The garrison finally accepts him as one of their own, welcoming the prince to 𝒓𝒏𝒄𝒆'𝒔. Honestly, the kid is obsessed with that banner, constantly reminding everyone that he earned it fairly. Vincent just smirks and mentions he has 16 of them. Looks like we have a rivalry on our hands. Adrian just watches in silence. Then, he completely ignores the man and insists once more that the banner is rightfully his. Within minutes, the soldiers are setting the entire orc encampment ablaze. Vincent notes that casualties were low considering they faced an elite unit. Althea sighs, saying any loss of life is a tragedy. Vincent simply argues that victory is the only tribute the fallen require. Honoring the dead with the blood of their foes is the way of House Valerius. Hearing those words, our boy recognizes the young commander, wondering if he could be the reincarnation of that great man. He then asks if the 3rd Legion had been following them all along. The man offers a weak excuse, claiming they simply ran into a squad of rangers nearby and decided to join the fray. Adrian calls it an unbelievable coincidence, but let's be real. The boy is not buying it. He knows Vincent did not trust him and organized a secret backup. Vincent notes it is very strange that an elite orc unit reached the mountain base, while none of the local rangers detected their movements. Their best bet is to retreat to the stronghold. Before long, they are safely behind the castle walls. Lord Valerius greets them, praising their success and expressing relief at their safe return. Adrian is still gloating over his new flag. Man, this is getting old fast. The soldiers whisper that he has told the story 11 times now. They are starting to tune him out. Vincent tells his father that the beastmen appeared far too early. Either they found prey, or something changed in the peaks. Honestly, neither of those situations is good for the realm. And right after that, his father wants to grant him rest, but the situation is dire. He orders the boy to follow him. As they enter the keep, Vincent glances at our hero, admitting his performance in battle was truly impressive. Adrian is baffled by the praise, wondering why the man is suddenly acting so out of character. Lady Althea explains that he is a stoic man who finds it embarrassing to change his tune so quickly. Just then, Lady Adeline appears, relieved he has returned safely. You already know what is coming. The kid grabs the banner again and asks if she recognizes his trophy. My God, I cannot take this anymore. Soon, time passes and Vincent announces that in a few days a scout unit will be organized to check the mountains. The terrain is unpredictable, so they are only recruiting elite specialists who are trained for mountain warfare. Because of the danger, His Highness is strictly forbidden from joining this particular mission. The prince asks why he came to his private chambers, just to repeat the council's orders. The young man says the commander personally ordered it. Adrian realizes his uncle is simply trying to make them become friends. Although, to be fair, that shouldn't be too hard, right? Once alone, the prince falls into deep thought, staring at that banner again. Please, not the flag again. He remembers being lost in the thrill of battle, reciting a full epic poem for the very first time. He will likely face this again. The poems he recites are not truly his own, but he must master them nonetheless. Suddenly, Adrian hears a rustle. Looking toward the window, he spots a small bird perched on the sill. But this little creature does not look friendly at all. Adrian knows exactly who sent this familiar. At that moment, the bird speaks, asking if the prince enjoyed the little gift she sent his way. Adrian stares in horror, asking if she was the one who lured those orcs to the mountain pass. She claims she merely wanted to provide a worthy opponent. She hoped he would appreciate such a fine gesture. Adrian is disgusted. Dozens of brave guards died, yet she speaks as if it were all a game. Elves love to watch from the shadows, likely enjoying the show as he fights the orc battalion they lured right to his doorstep. So this is what elven goodwill looks like. Immediately after, she demands he stop stalling and reveal her true desires at last. The girl calls him cold-hearted, but she accepts it because unrequited love always carries a bitter sting. She promises to wait for the day he opens his heart. Whispering in his ear, she mentions something he absolutely needs to see deep in the mountains. An ancient being sleeps within those peaks. And if he exploits the situation, he could compose a truly legendary heroic epic. Suddenly, the small bird begins to twist and deform. The girl explains her connection is fading, and the creature drops dead instantly. Adrian finds her annoying to the very end. It is painfully obvious what that woman actually wants from him. She wants him to craft a new heroic chant, but he decides to play along with her games for now. A bit later, Vincent notes that the local rangers treat these dangerous mountains like their own backyard. Even so, they stick to the outskirts because those who venture deep into the peaks never return. Their duty is preventing monsters from descending, not exploring the interior. Adrian asks if that means the heart of the range is a mystery. Long ago, noble knights seeking transcendence unraveled the world's mysteries. But this place remained a forbidden taboo. Regardless, while assessing the current situation, he realizes it was a brilliant move to have traveled to this land. Vincent warns him that strictly for the sake of safety. They should not even dream of entering the deep mountains. Adrian tells him to stay calm. But we all know he is definitely going in there. He claims he won't go, but he's just waiting for the right moment. Later, while sharpening his blade, Adrian wonders what secrets are hidden within those forbidden peaks. He feels the urge to explore immediately, but he knows he needs more victories and combat experience first. Suddenly, 𝒂𝒊𝒏𝒄𝒆'𝒔 sounds the horn. Everyone realizes an attack is underway. The knights scramble into position as our protagonist takes the lead. His uncle points out the battleground. Beyond the ridges, scouts are retreating in a panic. Adrian wonders why they are fleeing until a massive horde of wolf, riding orcs appears. Our hero senses something is wrong. His uncle notes that the monsters should have overtaken the scouts long ago. As soldiers rush toward the gate, one guard screams that they will all be slaughtered at this pace. He stays behind to hold the line, so his comrades can reach the safety of the castle. The brave soul falls in battle. Sadly, his sacrifice was not enough to ensure the survival of his fleeing comrades. Watching from the ramparts, 𝒂𝒊𝒏𝒄𝒆'𝒔 orders all soldiers except the border guards to descend from the high walls immediately. The warriors look upon the unfolding slaughter in total despair. Adrian asks if his uncle brought him all this way just to witness this horror. His uncle confirms it was a trap that would have easily devoured any reinforcements they sent too. Vincent adds that common sense is useless when fighting against these monsters. They do not value their own lives. A brutal war of attrition is exactly what the enemy desires. Since winter has just begun, they cannot afford to act on reckless impulse. Suddenly, the monsters begin advancing toward the castle gate. A soldier with a spyglass in hand spots a survivor among the fallen, realizing that one man still draws breath. However, that discovery does not change the fact that a massive army of monsters still remains. Valhard notes this winter feels different. Adrian wonders if that scheming elf has her hands in this mess as well. Just then, an orc far more powerful than the others steps forward. The beast lets out a deafening roar. Vincent assumes they are about to execute the prisoner. Adrian grips the man's shoulder and explains this isn't an execution. They are specifically declaring a formal duel to the death. In that moment, he remembers the elf's words regarding the ancient being slumbering deep within the mountain range. Suddenly, the giant beast speaks. He swears to fight with honor and restore the glory of his ancient legion. This is all done for the glory of their great king. Valhard asks if the orcs truly took hostages just to issue a duel. Adrian confirms it, though neither man believes him. He tells them that if they doubt him, he will show them. Standing atop the wall, our hero shouts his answer. He accepts the challenge, demanding everyone except the duelists retreat 200 paces and dismount from their wolves. The orc is stunned by his response. The beast wonders how a mortal speaks the ancient tongue, suspecting highborn blood. But Adrian retorts that he never studied such arts, demanding to know the creature's next move. The orc chieftain nods in agreement, warning that any stain on this sacred duel will lead to a merciless end. Julian asks the others if they finally trust him, but they just stare back, completely lost by his cryptic choice of words. Yet, in that same breath, the reality of the situation finally hit them. Every single orc began to retreat, leaving only the designated champions for the coming duel. Lord Valhard claims dozens of winters here haven't prepared him for this. Adrian just tells him to save the shock for later. Their terms are simple. 5 warriors for the duel, but only those who bled at the Battle of the Crags. With that, the council starts drafting a plan. Adrian looks at Lady Arwen and notes 2 of the slots are already taken. The knights protest, calling the move suicidal, but Julian asks who else can bridge the gap with these beasts. Besides, he couldn't possibly turn down a challenger showing that much raw passion for battle. He turns to Arwen, asking if she is ready, and without a second of hesitation, she vows to see it through. A few minutes later, Valhard asks where he learned the savage tongue, convinced those creatures were nothing but mindless animals. Adrian suggests he study his history, noting that only noble orcs serving their high king still speak the ancient dialect. Once everything was settled, the group descended from the ramparts. The final roster for the bloody trial was finally set in stone. Things are getting interesting. Our hero realizes that in a world this brutal, coincidences are usually just destiny at work. Just as he stepped into the light, elven envoys, strangers to this realm, arrived out of thin air to watch the show. And for the first time in 400 years, the Orc King himself marched out from the frozen north. Honestly, he had no clue why the world was shifting, but there was no time for questions. The duel was here, and Julian felt ready. The Orc King stares him down, asking if he is the one to face him. Adrian asks if the beast finds him lacking. Quite the opposite, he senses a spirit far stronger than any knight here. To the king, this boy is the only worthy prey. His flesh must be a rare, exquisite delicacy. Julian laughs, finding it ironic that the first creature to see his true worth without bias was a monster. In that very moment of realization, Sir Vincent warns that the beast is too powerful, offering to take his place. But there isn't a second to waste on debates. There was another fight brewing. The monsters weren't here for a chat, so both warriors dropped into their stances, ready for blood. Adrian warns that orcs don't wait for chivalry or rules, charging headfirst into the fray with a deafening roar. He shouts for them to do whatever it takes to survive. Steel clashes as the hours pass, and honestly, nobody can tell who has the upper hand. Julian lands a heavy strike on the Orc King, but the blow barely leaves a scratch. The beast scoffs, calling it a tragedy that such a powerful soul is trapped in such weak arms. The boy ignites his core, telling the monster they can finally start the real fight. A terrifying aura floods the entire field. Adrian realizes the raw emotion coming from Julian, is the same as the legendary vengeful ghost that once haunted the great northern plains. The more he watches, the more certain he is that coming to this border kingdom was the right move. Channeling every ounce of power, he thanks the beast for waiting, promising to use its life as a stepping stone to greatness. This kid is not joking.